Ladies and gentlemen, it's Friday. I hope that you're all having a beautiful day. I hope the birds are singing, the wind is at your back, and the sun is shining. We are here with the one and only Ranga, who we haven't talked together for a while. He's been traveling the globe since the last time I've seen him a little bit, and he's taken some trips not only to the outer world, but some trips in the inner world as well. So, Ranga, I'm so stoked you're here. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me here. I think, I can tell you in terms of it's been close to a couple of months or three major trips, I would say. Don't want to specify outer runner, it all means the same. But it kind of slowed me down even bit in a very good way because I feel like I need to slow down to appreciate what's going on. Yeah, if I'm not aware, I'm just rushing.
Yeah, it's easy to get caught up in what's going to happen in the future. Or, I heard a quote one time that said, yesterday is the past, tomorrow is the future, today is a gift. That's why they call it the present. And it helps you just kind of stay like, oh, I'm so thankful to have what I have right now. But why don't you tell us about these trips? I mean, you want to start with an inner trip, an outer trip, or you want to start with the language of what a trip is, or what do you think?
I I wasn't traveling much in my younger days, so I always had this idea that I wanted to travel to backpack and stuff when I was on my own. Let's say I went to for a foreign country from India, right? Like for a master's, I'm gonna do the first thing in my summer vacation is backpack and stuff, which I tried to do, and it was quite interesting experiences because traveling teaches you a lot. You meet interesting people, different cultures, different way things are done, and you're more absorbing, you're in a state of absorption. And especially when you travel alone, you don't
Yeah.
have extra noises and plans, right? So that happens. But I don't think that interest stayed with me for a longer period of time. It stayed until my first psychedelic trip, which directed me inwards. And for some reason I can't get myself to be too much fascinated or excited, I would say, uh, when I think about traveling outside. So I do not go out of my way to make plans for travel, right? So yeah, which means the thing that
Oh, I think you muted yourself. Nothing. Maybe is it me? Hmm. Can you hear me? I can't hear at all. There we go. Oh,
There we go. Oh, yeah, I'm just gonna remove that thing.
okay.
Okay. Are you able to hear me fine now?
I can.
Okay. So yeah, between the last time and now, I think I've had three trips. One of them being MDMA for the first time, and that was just mind blowing in the sense that I've read reports on what MDMA does, right? So there is always, even if you do not have these expectations, there are subtler expectations that comes, right? But to experience that and to just understand how it is helpful as a medicine, right? Practically understanding that this is a beautiful medicine was amazing. That experience, putting you in a state of awareness where you're not, so you know how with psilocybin or 4-ACO DMT, you and I have talked about, we get into this place where we can play with these thoughts without being attached to this. There is a state where we can invite the thoughts, play with it, and get into deeper state of thinking without being burdened by it, right? Normal days we might not be able to differentiate our thoughts versus what is actually important, imaginative thing versus the actual reality problems, right? But what I found difference with MDMA was it got me to a state of awareness where I just couldn't think. So what remained at that point was just, I was just fascinated by things. I was listening to music, and I had this idea that in MDMA you're moving or sorts. So I think I kind of wanted to see what happens when I move all these tinier details which I'm not paying attention to in my daily life because I'm, as I said, I'm busy with something, right? So I cannot be worried about my tiptoe, what's happening in the end of my finger, right? So these things got to the surface, and there was no thought about it. You're just like, ha, and you're like this innocent kid who's just, yeah, you want to call it a state of love. It was beautiful, and it was not the way of a physical kind of love, right? It was more of an emotional state where you don't want to act on it. You just understand that it's a state, and you're just there. And then what I add would be 90 to 100 milligrams of MDMA, since it was my first time. And I think 3 hours after the trip, I started with weed vape. And the come down, the what happened after that was very similar to a psychedelic come down. So have you had those combination MDMA and cannabis?
I have. I haven't done MDMA for a few years. However, my experiences of them were like an incredible body sensation tied together with full body awareness. And I think maybe that has to do with the oxytocin, or maybe the large amount of serotonin that's just released. But it's fascinating. I do feel as if I was able to communicate much more effectively, and especially with other people. I really felt this true sense of connection with anybody that I was around or I was speaking to. And it had completely diminished my ability to build barriers. Like, I felt as if in some ways, like if I take like LSD or psilocybin, it obliterates boundaries in a way where I don't see myself up against something. But the MDMA boundary was more of an internal boundary where, like, I didn't feel like I had to, put up any sort of front or protect myself. So they were both boundaries shifting, but they were different sorts of boundaries. And when I did come down, I would smoke a little bit of cannabis, and I felt that it brought back those sensations. It would intensify that trip and give me like another sort of mini trip from it right there. But the thing with MDMA for me was that on day 2, so I would take it, and then the next day I'd be okay. But the day after that, we would always call it being e-tarded, because you just feel like, I could be banging into walls. Like, what's wrong with me? I'm like, I'm all clumsy. And, maybe that's a deficiency of whatever neurotransmitter that you were really soaking up at that point in time. But yeah, it's a phenomenal way. And I think that's why they have so much success with using MDMA for relationships. It really does break down those barriers. And it is just this all-encompassing body awareness, and everything feels so good, and you really can bond with people. And it's an amazing experience for those that are in the right frame of mind to take it. So I did kind of take that. What's your take on the boundaries there?
I think you got the same gist of what I was going to eventually say. For example, I feel like psychedelics, in let's say a psilocybin or LSD, kind of encompasses the MDMA trip. Like, I feel like there is a way to reach the state what is offered by MDMA using LSD or psilocybin, but it's just that you need to put in a lot of effort, as you said, like what you have to see with the barriers coming up, right? Like, you need to do that, right? I tend to see psychedelics a little different than MDMA in ways where it's more of a self improvement tool. It's not a beginner's journey, right? MDMA could be something where I understand why it is very specific for, I mean, very helpful for PTSD people, because it is forgetting the state of love. It's not just that you simply don't remember what it is to be just innocently aware of things. We're caught up, right? Like when we have some trauma based problem, right? So I feel like MDMA gives you the glimpse of what it is, like the state that we have forgotten, and psychedelics can be the tool to show those barriers where you can work on every day, right? for some reason during my MDMA, there was no specific insight of what I can do in my life to change the way, in my sober sense, what can I do different to change, right? It wasn't there. But as soon as I had weed, that's why I felt like the come down was pretty psychedelic come down, similar to that, because a lot these barriers were coming up, and you're aware, oh, this is how this particular barrier is stopping me from being in my natural state. I'm being judgmental of this criteria. I'm being judgmental of that. So yeah, and I read this post once by a clinic which is trying to give a little bit of MDMA before psilocybin to avoid that uncomfortable come up that psilocybin sometimes has, right? And it made sense. MDMA provided this platform, right, where you're, to call it, safe and comfortable. It's like it's so beautiful there. And then you can, when you take psilocybin, it takes you from there. So you don't feel like there is a rapid shift in perceptions, right? So basically, I feel like come up for me, I've always felt, or at the end of the day, it's all physical sensations. I just feel really uncomfortable in my stomach, or this feeling of like, I just want to cry. I don't want to, why am I doing this? Right? The come up phase. But I also feel like the more you're trying to be equanimous with the come up, the better the trip goes to.
Yeah.
Yeah. So MDMA can provide that place where you're not too judgmental of your own come up with psilocybin. So
I could see that point. See, I think that this provides fertile ground for the next, I don't know, 20 years. And let me be clear. Like, I think that each type of psychedelic or plant medicine is like a tool in a mechanic's tool bag. And I think that the psychiatrist of tomorrow, or someone that runs a wellness center, like a Cole Butler, will be able to use these tools. If you see someone with PTSD and you're able to sit down with them for a few sessions and understand, thoroughly understand what they're going through, then you know what tool to use. Do you use a scalpel or a pipe wrench? Because those are two different tools. You know what I mean? If someone is struggling very difficult in a relationship, you got to figure out, okay, is that because this person has seen some horrific things? Are they upset at themselves? Or are they upset at the other person? But once you figure out those things, you can say, okay, look, I think that the best possible treatment here is going to be a round of psilocybin followed up by a couples therapy with MDMA. And I think that those textbooks could begin to be written soon. And I think it starts with experiences like you've had. I think it happens with experiences like common people out there. And this is where I think it gets really, really exciting, because we are pioneering a way forward. And those people that may not have a degree that is of a PhD level, but are very experienced in psychedelic substances, I think that they can contribute an incredible amount. They should be publishing papers, they should be writing journals, and they should be getting this work out there, because those are going to be the notes that the future people turn to. So it makes it exciting for me to get to hear about your experience and the using of the two together. I don't know how sold I am on the MDMA before the psilocybin, but I could understand wanting to ease the come up a little bit. But I could imagine that the interaction of those two probably feels phenomenal. But because I haven't experienced it that way, I guess I should try it to go that way. But
you should definitely. So
yeah,
I told you 3 trips, right? The third trip
right.
was this, where it was 50 milligrams of MDMA, which was taken at 2 hours after the initial ingestion of 50 micrograms of LSD, right? And then almost an hour later, MDMA. So that's 3 hours after LSD. I think I took 0.5 grams of penis envy. So that was pretty strong.
Wow.
And
This is all in one session?
Yeah, it was
Okay.
within the 3-hour gap, right?
Okay,
And the trip
okay.
just went on till, and everything wasn't too much of a dose, right?
Right.
And I wanted to experiment. Like, I used to have
Yeah.
this judgment maybe 8 months back, the first time I went to Aerovid or something, and people had this combinations, right? And I was like, who does this? Why don't you have respect for psychedelics? Take one at a time. What the fuck, right? Like, and you know, And after LSD, I think my partner and I, we were talking, and it's like, these are judgments again. Like, it comes up. And this time, uh, I was very curious because I was reading this thing. There is a name for the combinations, right? Do you know about it?
Candy flipping?
Yeah, candy flipping, and then the candy flipping is just psilocybin and LSD, I think, and then yeah, the combinations, they have different names. But what basically happened was LSD at 50 mcg is kind of not microdose, but it's not too much
Right.
of intoxicating, right?
Right.
You're still, your language is still sound, you're still able to do a lot of things very efficiently. And after that, MDMA again didn't suddenly shift the perceptions, but what they were doing was provide such a comfortable platform on which I feel like the shrooms took the trip. And at that time, 0.5 gram shrooms was beautiful. It was enough. It was sufficient.
Yeah.
And after that, I think for 4 hours or 5 hours, it was pretty intense. And yeah, I mostly have a lot of music listening on my psychedelics, because there is no, because it's just purely there with each tone of the sound, right? The whole music changes what I'm listening to. And that went for 4 hours, and the come down again was so gradual because the LSD effect stays for 12 hours, and MDMA is so on psilocybin for 5 hours, and these have this combinations working out in a very magical way. And there is no, I felt like that was one of the most easiest trips, because usually when I've taken things alone at higher doses, there is always this part like, why am I doing this?
Mm-hmm.
Shit, I don't want to do this. I have this I could have just, smoked some weed, watched some movie, done something else, right? Like, why am I doing this? But I think that was the first time in a trip where there was none of these questions. I was like, wow. And also the best part is psychedelics do make you in such a way that you cannot repeat that immediately. Even though I've heard MDMA can be addictive, just because you're combining this in such a unique way, you don't want to take it the next day or the next
Right.
week. Like, you just simply don't. It's not like smoking a cigarette where you're slowly building up this addiction. It's just the neurons that are responsible for addictions is simply not happening with these psychedelics.
Yeah.
So
And
you
I
should
think
definitely try the combination, 100%.
it sounds awesome. Yeah. It makes me want, like, I got a couple points. The one point I wanted to talk quickly about is this idea of taking, like, regardless if you took any one of those drugs, for me, there's a processing period afterwards where even though I may not be high, like, I'm still getting the effects. I feel like I'm still having, or at least trying to piece together the abstract thoughts to make sense of them. And for me, it may not be as intense as the peak, but it's really rewarding because it helps me put together, like, that missing piece of the puzzle that I was missing. When you have like a puzzle and you're like, I can't figure is that a corner piece? Why is it all black right there? Oh yeah, it fits like that. So for me, it's like a week after I still have these insights. And I feel if I rush it, if I do a big trip on a Saturday and then I was going to do something on a Wednesday, I would alleviate that possible insight that I would have if I just took time to process it through that way.
Yes.
But yeah, I think that is a very interesting process of taking those three together. At any point in time when you took those three together, what did you feel like they kind of came in and melded? That's the way it said, or was there ever a time you felt like they were fighting each other?
No. Oh, they were like friends. So I was having
friends.
this thought where I am the platform. Instead of they providing platform, I'm the platform for them to meet.
Ooh, I like that.
So it was more like they were meeting inside me. So what was happening was that, and there is no fight there. It's simply
Right.
not. And with respect to what you said about the insight, it's so true. I think it's what people refer to as afterglow, or maybe it's just a word that I have with my friend. I don't know. It's a thing, right? So afterglow is definitely I think it stayed there. With the combination of this, it just stays, right? And once you start integrating some kind of a practice into your daily routine, and you're slowly making those changes to integrate this, and it's so true. If you do have that one more trip immediately, you're not gonna get the full benefits
Yeah.
of a psychedelic. You should give it time for yeah, the insights do slowly come up, because I feel like we become more observant, so the barriers take time to come, right? So before the barriers comes, the doors of perception, we are standing on the other door, so we get something. We
Yeah.
always get something out of it. And I think 2021 was a year where there was no trip, and
Mhm.
I saw how things were different then. It's not just that psychedelics are essential. Once in a while you can let go of them as a tool, but I wasn't there at that point. So I realized after a year the barriers came up really quickly, and then I think I went 2 trips back to back, and I felt not so happy about it. Not because like I'm abusing the drug, more so like I know I could make more use of it.
Right.
But it's all about the timing. You can extract so much more if you just wait for the right time, right? And that's so true given these drugs. And I don't know. I will definitely encourage you to make that decision and try to give it a day. And you can go for the same dose, and I can we can talk what
Yeah.
you feel. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. It makes me think as you were talking about your year off, like taking a year and then going back to back. I started thinking about my own habits of specifically psilocybin use, and the more that I just kind of came to me, but the same way that the psilocybin, when you take it, like if you take a healthy dose or even a smaller dose, but a dose that you can feel, it comes in waves, right? Like it's one wave hits you and you're like, oh, I'm tripping. Okay, I'm not so much. Oh, I'm tripping. And it intensifies like that. I kind of feel like that's the same way. It's almost like a microcosm. That's the same way I've been taking mushrooms. Like I'll go through a phase where I'll take one dose in like 3 months, and then all of a sudden I'll take 2 doses in 2 months, and then I'm going to take a dose every weekend, and then I back off. So it's almost like it's following that same pattern in the way I take it as the way it hits me. But I didn't think about that until just recently. I'm like, you know what? It kind of comes in the same type of waves. But I had this other point that I found myself sucked into Carl Jung's Red Book. And because I'm a mere mortal, like I had to buy the accompany reader, you know. But I've dug down and I found this point, and I want to get your opinion on it here. So I'm going to read a little blurb right here.
Yes.
Jung introduced a distinction between interpretation on the objective level, in which dream objects were treated as representations of real objects, and interpretations on the subjective level, in which every element concerns the dreams themselves, as well as interpreting the trip. So now here's my part. So Carl Jung is talking about the objective, the way we interpret things on an objective level, the way we interpret things on a subjective level. But then he gets into the ideas of interpreting things on a collective level. And
Yeah.
I'm wondering, like, maybe that's what's happening when you're at the height of a psychedelic trip, is that you are beginning to interpret the world around you on a collective level. It's like so many people have similar insights, and so many people have this feeling of oneness, and so many people have this feeling of being in touch with the world around them. I'm wondering what you think about interpreting the world around you on a collective level versus an objective or a subjective level.
I think the when it involves psychedelics, now that you're talking it, I'm trying to give it a thought in that aspect, but I've always felt it's more of the objective sense, where regardless of any person and their ideas, collectivity, it's still like subjective, just it's
Right.
collective, like language,
Right.
right? So we are
Right.
talking, it's a collective assumption that this word means this thing, right?
Sure. Semantics.
Yeah. And it's still subjective, right? So collectively it's still subjective, but objective in that part, that psychedelics, again, my point of view, right, it puts you in a state of awareness that is not attached to any kind of relativity. So I mean like higher doses and deeper states of meditation. I mean, not you can interact with the world on psychedelics. That's not what I'm saying, but there is the potential for psychedelics to offer you a state which is beyond duality, right?
Yeah.
And what I feel like happens on the collective level is most people are able to retain what they felt, the state of oneness, right? And these are approximations towards the truth, right? It is not the
Mm.
actual thing, right? The menu is not the food, right? It's like that. And so we collectively come up with this thing and to discuss our ideas and so on. And again, at subjective level, it's yeah, it can be whatever how you perceive.
Yeah, I often wonder. I often wonder what the discussion between Krishnamurti and Young would have been like, because I think Krishnamurti has that idea of like, you can't interact with the world. You're just projecting onto the world. Like, so you
Yeah.
can't have a relationship with the world. But Carl Jung over here is like, wait a minute. So I just, that would be a fascinating conversation to hear. I did have this other crazy insight that I wanted to run by you to see what you think.
Yeah.
So I did this experiment where I was taking like somewhere between a half a gram and a gram a day for 30 days. And it not a micro dose, but like not a macro dose either, definitely a dose that you can feel. And
Yeah.
so, and while this was happening, like I was able to write down some really cool ideas, or at least what I thought were cool. And one of them was this idea of the relationship between light and perception. And my idea of it is this. It seems like on LSD or on psilocybin, at times you find the pupil incredibly dilated. And I think of that. I think of the dilated pupil like an open shutter in camera raw. Like you're getting more information in there. You're getting more light in there. And we've read all these things like light has memory. And there's all these crazy, words in the lexicon or phrases like they were blinded by the light and move into the light and all these things about light. And I'm thinking, if your pupils are dilated longer, are you getting more information into the computer and able to process it? And maybe you don't thoroughly understand it, but might that be what intuition is? Like I feel when I'm on a trip, and especially during this 30-day experiment, like I felt like there was not only more of a connection, but I felt like I could read the world around me in a way that was almost foreign. And all I could attribute it to was, well, you could say, hey, you're just on a bunch of drugs, you big dummy.
Yeah.
But I think that there may be something to the idea of the dilated pupil and taking in more light and taking in more information and thus understanding more. What do you think? Is that too crazy to think about?
It's true. I see it the same way until the part where you told about intuition. So I definitely have wondered, why does my pupils go so dilated? I just go and stand in the bathroom mirror and just like,
yeah.
Sometimes I wonder, because all this information is coming, right? And what's happening is our normal processing system is not able to comprehend everything. So it's trying to put it as soon as it can. And that's why the hallucinatory effects, right? So what's happening is like just too much information, but the speed of the system is still maybe not enough.
Rainbow reel.
Part's different. Like the shutter is wide open,
right?
But the system is still like, wait, we were just firing a bunch of neurons. What happened? Now I gotta work more. Like, dude, we are lazy. So let me just put this bunch of things, and we have this bunch of synesthesia happening. Like, wait, this is too much information. I don't know. I'm just gonna send it to the auditory nerve. But that was light from the eyes. Yeah, I don't know. Just have it, right? And synesthesia happens. So that definitely happens. But when it comes to intuition, I feel like what I believe is it's just intuition is something that you carry in your body, right? The same way your body knows how to beat your heart, do the bowel movements, urinary bladder and so on. It gives you the certain aspect of voluntary response, like control, and most of them are happening at a level that we simply cannot control.
Yeah.
Right? Same with language processing, right? Most of the language is happening at the subconscious level, right? Like we think of that this is what we want to talk about, but we cannot talk about it. Our conscious mind is slow to keep up with the rapid pace these words are generated, right? And intuition in that sense would be something like close to how a heart is beating, but it's just so subtle. And I feel like we have so much noise, right? And what happens with psychedelics with respect to what you are saying is, when we get too much information and it overloads our system, then we're like receding from that to our place of intuition. Like, wait, this sound. I've not visited you because I thought the world was outside there, but you're here, right? And the meditation that I'm following right now has so much to do with perceiving the sensation aspect, right? So, whatever you're seeing in the world, your body is reacting to it, right? Your senses are reacting to it, and you're basically reacting to your senses. That is kind of how they say, well, like that's how Buddha defined it, right? Or that's the hypothesis we have on the process, right? And when I'm on these drugs, it gives me more awareness of my body. As you said, MDMA is a great tool for that. That's why I feel like what you said with respect to body awareness, I said with respect to the end of my finger, because
Yeah.
I'm too focused on my normal day, like until like, oh yeah, my nail is hurting or like something. I'm not focused there, right? So you can be focused even when there is no reason to be focused. After all, there is no reason to things that we are doing anyways. So and so when I get to that part of watching how my body is reacting to the world and how I am basically reacting to my body, I have these uncomfortable sensations, right? And especially during the come up of psilocybin. And it's beautiful what you did, 0.5 grams to 1 gram every day. So you did it every single day for 30
Every
days.
day. Yeah.
Nice. So I
Yeah.
am trying to do that once a week. So I have this 52-week plan for this year, right?
Nice.
And I think 3 weeks it's been going well. I take 0.5 to 0.7, whatever that particular stem and cap is. And
Right.
How was the come up? I know I'm shifting topics. I want to get your
Yeah.
opinion about how are you feeling? Because I tend to feel that 0.5 to 1 gram can put you in very uncomfortable space more often than not. Is it true
So
for
what
you?
I didn't really have too much of a problem with it. I would take it, I would cut it up really fine, like almost in a powder. I
Yeah.
put it in a blender, and then I felt that if you do it that way,
Yeah.
that it's much easier on your stomach. It's a million times easier versus trying to gnaw up a cap or like chew on a stem or something like that. And another thing that I think is worth noting is that, at least in my opinion, and this is purely subjective, I did not really feel any sort of tolerance at all. Which kind of is kind of mind blowing to me, because I'm so used to reading the literature of, oh, you should take it every 3 days, or every 2 days, or some people take it every 4 days, and they talk about receptor burnout and all these things. But for me, I took it and I felt it every day. Maybe there's some confirmation bias there. It's very
Yeah.
possible.
Yeah.
But I didn't feel as if the come up was a problem at all. I could feel it at all. But for me, I think it's worth noting that come ups for me are never really bad. There are times when they're worse than others, but it's not something I notice every time. And it could have been the type of mushroom I was taking. So there's a
Yeah.
lot of factors in there. But yeah, I would say some major points that I noticed on that, besides the light in the pupil, and the come up wasn't too bad. I felt, for me at least, there was not a reduction in tolerance. I felt a like, I'm a pretty weird guy anyway, but I felt as if I was sort of withdrawing a little bit from my surroundings. So that
Mm.
maybe, and I don't classify that as good or bad. I just something noticeable.
Yeah.
Like I felt as if, even though I'm comfortable talking to people and I enjoy that, I
Yeah.
felt as if I did kind of want to just be with my own thoughts more so than without it.
Yeah.
And I think it's worth noting. I ended up getting sick like on day 30. I don't know if because maybe I had a cold. I don't know what that did to what if it did something to my my immune system or something like that. But I remember before I got sick, I should just keep doing this. I remember being super stoked on it, So
Yeah.
but it's a fun experiment, and I mean, it's if I think it's worth other people trying and writing down and checking things out, because I do think there's something to be said about long-term exposure to different states of consciousness and the subjective effects it has with you interacting with the world around you. So yeah, it was pretty cool. Do you have any other questions about it? I kind of like talking about it.
I love that. I just wanted to ask that particular part because I also tend to have that different respect with the method of ingestion. I feel like if you're able to create those uncomfortable situations in a manageable range, right? Like, for example, eat it acid. Like, I try to do that, and it's just, you don't want to do that. Like, I don't want to do that, but I'm slowly biting. I take my time, 5 minutes, because it gives me the chance to not react to what's happening in my mouth, right? And I feel like that strengthens my non-reactivity to my things that are happening, which by makes the come up in an interesting way, right? Yes, I think when I did take that 5 grams, it was too much shrooms to eat it. So
it's
I
a
did
lot.
grind it for the first time, and at that time I think the come up was so smooth. But you're right, I've not noticed it until now. But when you eat it, this whole lot of things happening in the stomach.
Mm-hmm.
I tend to see that as an opportunity, because that sets the tone for the rest of your day, right?
Mm-hmm.
How much are you able to not react to your own things? Because if on some level that this is not like gonna last long, or more like this is not too damaging your stuff, right? You don't need to go to hospital or stuff. Once that's cleared, it's uncomfortable sensations which are gonna go away.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's so true.
What am I gonna do? All I can do is just wait for it to go away, right? And while I'm waiting, I can wait positively. I don't have to wait like I don't have to wait for it per se. Yeah, I can coexist with it. But what does happen after an hour of ingestion is something magical. It's just I found 0.5 to 0.7. Again, penis envy is quite strong, I assume.
Really strong.
Yeah, so it kind of like there is very minor hallucinations, very minor. Like if I wanted to just keep looking at something and like see that's changing,
see it moving.
Yeah, it does move. But if I also want to think, no, I know it's not moving, right? A house is not moving. It has a good foundation, and it doesn't move, right? So it puts me in that range where, like, yeah, if you want to have fun, it's like a remote control. Put the hallucination channel.
That's so funny.
But I still have after that I still feel like I get to a part of maybe not tiredness but the afterglow, or parts where at least for the next 2 days I don't want to take. And most weeks I work Monday to Thursday, long days, so I don't get the opportunity. So I kind of do it every weekend, and it's been good so far. It does. I feel like it's just like learning any instruments or stuff, right? As you said, if you are recurringly in that state of consciousness, it strengthens there, right? And it's about where you want to be. Like this world is, you're free to do anything you're supposed to be, but yeah, at least on some level, that's the only freedom we have.
I think that if we go back to the come up again real quick, it reminds me of something you had said in a previous conversation. You had previously spoken about a retreat that you went to where one of the objectives was to sit and not move your body regardless of what you feel. And sometimes in the beginning when you're like, I just itch one time, but then you said that you came to this idea of like, yeah, you just sit with it. And I think that that's the same thing with the come up, right? Like, yeah, it's going to be bad. It's going to bother you, but you just sit with it and then it goes away. And in some ways, it's almost like its own little meditation right there.
Definitely. Everything becomes meditation after you know what meditation is about, right? Like, at least many people argue that meditation is something you don't do, meditation does you. I don't know, but the practice of meditation, what you're doing, trying to going and sitting for 1 hour or something, right? Based on whatever practice you have. So what you're trying to do in that 1 hour slowly kind of translates throughout the day, right? Like if let's say you're focused on your breathing to calm your mind, right? Most times when you lose it in the real world situations, you just don't remember that there is a tool for you to remain calm.
Mhm.
You do come back to your senses after some time. It's about minimizing the gap, right? But when you keep regularly sitting, and when you see that 1 hour thing you talked about, if you're seeing that, yeah, if I'm able to stay equanimous to this, non-react to this, what if I can do in the real world, right? When something is happening to you and you're reacting to that, it's like, oh, I do have a practice now of non-reaction, and I can do that. And you come back to your senses more quickly. That does happen. And it's true, the psilocybin come up is pretty similar to what would happen when you have your blood not flowing properly in your leg after the end of 58th minute. You just want to move it like just a little bit, just a little bit. I think the nerve is pinched there, right? Yeah, you should
So
yeah, you
I
should
was just,
give it a try.
yeah, it
It's
sounds
Indian
fascinating.
meditation. Yeah.
I think too, sometimes one thing I like to do on my trips, as I've gotten a little bit older and I've gotten more comfortable with the entirety of it, is that, I really want to, a few years ago, I really started wanting to bring things back from there. Like, what is it that I can learn? And one thing I've been able to do is I'll take my phone with me, and it's very difficult sometimes to remember what happened. So what I've done is I'll have my phone in front of me, and it's difficult to see the numbers and stuff sometimes because it's just all blurry. But you can see the big red button. So if you just hit that big red button when you're tripping your balls off, and you say into the mic like the ideas that you have, like, oh, I can see my life from 25 different reflections right now. Like if you can make some verbal notes, or you get, I think in the heightened state of awareness of a LSD trip, an MDMA trip, or a psilocybin trip, like you get to try on ideas that you would never get to try on in your regular consciousness. So the trick is to try and describe those ideas to your phone while you're in the midst of it. And so I would challenge people who want to thoroughly understand their own consciousness, or thoroughly understand what's happening to them or what they're thinking of unconsciously, to do that, to try to bring something back from the psychedelic state. I think it was Terence McKenna who once said that your job, a psychedelic trip is like being thrust out onto the dark oceans of despair. And once you find yourself in the black squall, you must cast out your net and let it sink to the bottom and pull it back up. And so many times you pull up your net and it's just thrashed. But every now and then you pull up that net and there's a giant treasure in there, and you take it back to the shores to share with the people. And I've always found that so powerful and compassionate. And I think that that's where we're at. And I think more and more people are doing that, whether it's your ideas that you've already explained with MDMA, or Benjamin George over there writing books like No Absolutes, or, Kevin Holt or Paula Powell, or, Dr. Johnson talking about the symbolic images that confer information. But yeah, it's a fascinating time we live in. And speaking of that, I recently read a study, Ranga, about, so I guess DARPA is spending millions of dollars trying to understand if the psychedelic effects can help out people who are anesthetized. They're trying to take away the actual conscious trip and give people the psychedelic benefits while they're anesthetized. Have you heard about this study? And if so, what do you
No,
think?
it's quite interesting. I have not. So, do you wait? If I'm not getting it wrong, do you take an anesthetic as well as a psychedelic at the same time?
So they would put somebody under, like,
Yeah,
just put them under, anesthetize them, and then
yeah.
feed them the psychedelics, and
Ah,
then see if they are getting the same beneficial results
yeah,
versus somebody who doesn't get them. And one of the reasons they're saying that they're trying this is that, oh, well, people don't want to go through those difficult times. So what if we just put them under, give them the psychedelics, will they do it? I think you have to do the work. I was talking to Cole about this.
Yeah,
I think it's
you have
trying to take a
to.
shortcut.
Yeah, but I also feel that would work in the level that, uh, again, this was something that I kind of got introduced to during meditation, where they talked about the level of awareness that we are usually in. So when I still sleep, right, I'm completely gone. I just there is blank space or stuff, and because I smoke weed regularly, I have zero dreams, or I don't retain dreams, at least consciously, right? So when I wake up, it's just I feel refreshed. There is a gap that I'm just gone and I'm back, right? But when I go to a 10-day retreat, and if I'm doing my practice properly, right, you're becoming more aware of your body sensations, and when you do go to sleep, you're not actually sleeping. You have the ability to be aware of your sleep the whole night, right? It didn't happen for me the whole night, but even having the glimpses of, oh wait, I know I'm sleeping but I'm aware, right? It was a state where you're clear, you're just present, the body is sleeping, right? So I do feel like when psychedelics are given during anesthetics, the state of awareness is such a way that we're not tied just to the body. The body is still sleeping, but our awareness is not of this reality or this plane of existence. So our awareness can do, still stay the same. And with respect to taking something back from the trip, it's a good perspective. I think it depends on where you're at the journey, right? If you're a comfortable person who has had privileges, wouldn't have to fight for stuff, wouldn't have problems from society, then of course, when you go have a psychedelic trip, you're gonna have to take something back, because it's about. And for me, I felt like I was on the opposite sides, where I was being told to follow these set of stuff. Like I felt like I had low self-esteem. I felt like I was short. I felt like I had these issues, right? So what psychedelics offered me was, oh, this is the place I drop them. So there is nothing to take. I am perfect as I am, so I can return empty-handed, right? So that's what I feel like is different based on where you're at the journey.
Wow.
Like same with there is this series called Samadhi by Daniel Schmidt on YouTube and Gaia as well, and it's beautiful. It's a 3-episode thing, and they are making episodes, once in a while, and it's basically to get you to meditate. That's the whole idea. The word Samadhi is about deep concentrated levels, right? So it's an approximate explanation of what it actually is, but basically what he says in that is sorry, can you just start me where we were going from?
Yeah. So we'd stopped. I think we were moving towards cultural conformity of barriers.
Yes. So sorry, I just have brain freeze at point. What he was saying in Samadhi was pretty much similar to this. There are two methods to these, and one is via positiva and one is via negativa, right? And positive methods these are not positive and negative as in good and bad, or like harmful and not harmful. Positive and negative or examples are like yoga, right? You're going out there, you're doing stuff. You're doing stuff to reach states of consciousness. Different methods. There are different practices where you have to learn a particular skill, and then there are methods where you're receding. I'm just gonna sit, right? So one of Vipassana meditation is one of those where you're receding from all activities. You go to a dark room, wherever, you're sitting in complete silence. You're not engaging, you're not adding to more actions, you're not doing this. So there are different methods for people, and I've always felt attracted, and I always felt it was the thing for me with respect to negative methods, right? And the same goes to the psychedelic trips, right? I just simply cannot, there is nothing for me to take from there, because that's my true state. I actually have a lot of stuff that I have here now that all I can learn is to drop them. Yeah.
That's fascinating. I never maybe that points to how small-minded I am. Like I have never really taken the time to think about, and I don't. How would you know? I mean, I don't know. I guess how would you know what other people think about on their psychedelic trips unless you asked them? But yeah, that's fascinating to think. Do you think it's a cultural thing, like that? This culture makes sense if you have these, if you've fulfilled Maslow's hierarchy of needs up to, point 3, then your idea of the psychedelic trip is probably going to be different than someone who hasn't filled 1, or someone who's at the peak right there. I guess people are searching for different things in different psychedelic landscapes. But what do you think are some other cultural barriers or some other conformities that happen between different cultures? Because you've got to spend your time, like you're in Canada, you've gone to Western schools, but you were born in India. So like you've gotten to kind of bridge these different gaps. What do you think is some of the differences?
Differences, it's it's hard to say those things because exceptions do apply to everything.
Right.
And you could have let's just take, if you're going to talk about white privilege or black people being on the bashing side, you can have a case where there is exception of a black guy who was raised in a privileged way and a white guy who was treated really horrible. So there are no actual cultural things that are happening except for the individual has to figure it out there on their own, because whatever we can talk about will never reflect the true picture of what is actually going on, right? So
Right.
yeah, so personally in my experience I feel like, yeah, barriers were there, but I think I've stayed in this path for almost 4 years now, and that has strengthened my um at least knowing that this is what I want to do, right? So what I would have considered as problems in my initial part of the journey are not problems anymore, because yeah, it's simply because you have to participate in that deeply enough, and you have to be part of the problem, carry it for it to be actually a problem, right? So the more you realize you have that power of dropping things, right? One of the things society might tell is that dropping these things is the negative thing. They put the whole issue on the part that if you drop these things, if you drop these cultural things, traditional things, then you're bad, right? But it's actually sometimes when you drop this, it gets to a relieving state. So it's kind of like you kind of have to experiment with what you're doing, and it will take time, because in a psychedelic state you're much clear of what is that you want to do, right? But it takes a night of sleep, and then next morning we're back to most of our habit patterns, right? And
Yeah.
it's gonna take some time, some practice, and a lot of just focus on, okay, this is what I want to help myself truly, because we can all, if we focus on ourselves, we can be truly free. Like, freedom is so much within us. It's not with respect to predetermined or free will. I don't care about that. Most of the life can happen in cause and effect, and like my decisions can be predicted, but I don't have to be affected by how my decisions are, because it's happening the same way how my heart is beating and so on. Like, decisions happen, things happen. You don't have to take it as something personally happening to you're personally doing. You can totally detach from the whole process of your own life and just keep watching it. And the funny thing, like, life moves forward.
Mhm.
But in the worst case is death, where you stop existing. But rest of the time, yeah, there can be a lot of physical suffering and mental suffering and so on, but there is still changes happening, right? Life is moving forward, things are happening. And yeah, I think it takes a lot of time and a lot of practice. I think I had recently had an experience with a fire, which kind of surfaced up a lot of fear of death, right? And it was great to have that, because with that came a lot of compassion, and a lot of my anger dropped. Like, let's say, the initial thing I had after psychedelics was anger towards, let's say, a system, a particular way of things, and being rebelliousness was needed at that point to protect my boundary. But you have to drop that tool also at some point for you to truly help yourself. So I felt like I needed an experience in my life to drop what I was using as a tool. Let's say there was a point because people, in my initial part of the trip, the common question, at least when I went to India, was you shouldn't be doing this now. You should be doing it post 60, right? I think I would have mentioned it almost every time. And it's funny. And at that time, you don't know. You're still figuring out, should I be doing this? Because I mean, you have lived longer. Like you're 50 years old. You maybe what you're saying is right. So you're still confused. So at that point, there are certain defense mechanism comes up. So some people give up their ideologies of what they saw in psychedelics and consider it, oh, it's just hallucinatory drug. Real life is different, right? So for me, it was just lucky that I considered what happened on psychedelics um, to be my natural state. So what the world was asking of me, I didn't have to do it per se, and it didn't matter because you're still like things just happen, right? So I was lucky on that aspect that I was able to know this is what I want to do. So I had a lot of anger to, let's say, if someone asked like, the fuck, at that point, because don't forget, I'm still like trying to figure out why are you, bothering me, like I'm trying to understand this. So now I feel like I've gotten to a point, at least with this experience, that uh yeah, I don't need to be angry. Like that's again that has become an habit pattern. I don't think any of the people who talk to my parents or relatives who is going to talk to me actually bother me. But this is what cultural issues would be. Like 3 years back, it would severely affect me, right? I would spend days thinking if I'm doing the right thing. Now there is no question. I clearly understand you have your point of view, and same, I have my own point of view. And it's simply, when you ask someone, what do you think about so and so? And if they say an answer, it's simply impossible for you to say you're wrong, because the question was, what do you think? Right? Like, and the whole life, I feel like, is about what we think and what we want to make of it. So we can pick up things, we can drop things whenever we want.
Yeah, that's
Sure
well said.
We just have to make sure we don't hurt anyone in the process, right? That's one thing, the golden rule in all religions, which I seriously believe. Any action that I'm doing, so for example, I think I saw this post on LinkedIn about etiquettes. There was a 5-minute video of different etiquettes, right? And I was like, so for me, etiquettes was never there in India. So we were free, right? And then the first time I had to go to a, let's say, a posher place with one of my relatives, it was like I had to use fork and spoon, and it was like I had to learn on the spot. And it's fine. And then after psychedelics, I dropped all those. I don't care. This is how I eat. Like, this is how I eat. Like, what can I do? If I didn't have hands, would you expect me to have a fork and a spoon? No, you'd understand. So consider me disabled. I don't care, but I'm just going to eat the way I want. Right? Because if you're getting bothered about this, it's a place for you to work. Right? And this is one of the things I initially add about my like letting my hair grow. Most times people would say something to me, let's say this happened in India 6 years back, right? So 2 months I felt bad and I went up and cut my hair. So now I just started growing. And when, again, as I say, like the more people are used to how you are, they really don't care. It doesn't bother. What bothers them is the change, the initial, how can you? I've seen a lot of, shaved people. Why do you have a beard, right? That initial shock. But if people keep seeing bearded people, people keep seeing ungroomed people keep seeing, people with no etiquettes, it's fine. That's how natural the world will be. And same makeups, right? I truly believe, like, if we like drop all that aspects of trying to cover up, that's how we provide opportunity. Same with, why do we take psychedelics? To strengthen the states of consciousness. So you need to give people the chance to see as you are, so that they get a chance to accept as you are. If we keep covering ourselves, of course, the day we forget to cover, it's going to be a why not today? What happened? Are you okay? Imagine if a person is putting makeup for weeks and weeks, and one day they don't do, people assume she's sick or he is sick. Don't you think so? I felt so. The day I used to shave every day with my 25 pieces of hair like 8 years back, right? And if I didn't, even my dad shaves every day compulsively. And when he doesn't, It's like, are you okay? He doesn't do it on a important religious day or like, anniversary day of, death anniversary and so on. But my point being, all I realized was we have to give people the chance to see as we are. So lots of back and forths to doing that.
Yeah. It makes me think of the concept of masks. Like everybody's wearing this mask, and
Yeah.
I wear a mask, like I wear a mask of a truck driver sometimes, or I wear a mask of a father, or I wear a mask of a teacher, or and it brings me back to the ideas of when I think of culture and masks and covering up and etiquette and all these sort of things that we do to portray an image of someone we want to be. There's a really good myth that I read. I forgot which tribe it was, and I think it was in Joseph, some sort of Joseph Campbell book I was reading, and it was this idea, and it was like in this particular tribe, the elders in the tribe, they would every now and then an elder would walk to the tribe with a mask on. One would be a scary mask, one would be like a hat, like a clown mask, and one would be a sad mask. And from time to time, these elders with these masks, they would walk up to the children. And by children, I mean like ages like 7 and below. And if it was a scary mask, the person in the mask would scare the kid. If it was a clown mask, they would walk up and tickle the kid. And if it was a sad mask, they'd be crying. And there was a series of other masks. These are just examples. And then at the age of 12, there was the people with the masks would break into the house of the child that was turning 12, and they would go around the kid's bed and they would take the kid, and the mom would come in and like the mom was in on it. The parents were totally in on it. And the kid would be like, mom, dad, don't let him take me. And they would take the kid and they would take him out of the middle of the street, and the mom and dad would try to fight, but they would let the kid go. And now the kid finds themselves in a circle of their elders all wearing masks, and the kid's crying and freaking out. And the person with the scary mask would go into the circle and they would scare the kid. The kid would freak out. And then the elder would take the mask off and show the child, hey, I'm your uncle. And then they would take the mask and they would put it on the kid. The kid would be like, whoa. And then the sad mask would come out and start crying and be super sad. And they would take the mask off. And then the kid would see, hey, it's my aunt. And then they would take the mask and they would put it onto the kid. And I just thought, like, what a beautiful way to show the next people coming up, everybody you see, whether they're happy, they're sad, they're angry, they're upset, they're wearing a mask. And guess what? You wear the mask too. But what a beautiful way to show people in the environment and your surroundings, like, this is how you deal with people like that. Hey, sometimes you should put on the happy mask and help people. Sometimes when you see someone that's scared, they're wearing the angry mask, but they're just masks and we're all the same. And I feel like we've gotten away from that in our societies. And I actually tried to like get this thing going at my kids' school, but they were like, dude, you're weirdo, knock it off, man. But like, wouldn't that be a great way to show kids?
It's quite an amazing thing, like, doing it. These are beautiful parenting tricks,
Yeah.
But kids, dad and mom are not the only parents, right? And you
Right.
observe that in mostly indigenous culture, at least what I've read so far, that parenting is something they do collectively, right? And
Yeah.
these are beautiful tricks to help kids not to think too permanently of situations that are actually very temporary and ephemeral, right? One of the main points of the meditation that I practice is the law of impermanence, that nothing stays. Everything is going to keep changing, and you have to, there is a, we more, most of us know, not most, like almost, let's say all of us kind of know that we're going to die, right?
Yeah.
We don't experience the urgency of life as such. Like, the only way we get lost right now, I'm focusing every day, I'm not present, all I can focus is I'm gonna die. But knowing that doesn't help me. I have to do something that actually evokes that fear. Same way, we have to teach these at the right time, that these are temporary things. When we remove that mask, it's beautiful. The more this happens, the kid is gonna learn that this is the natural state of us, right? And we don't, when some people put on the masks for days together, those are times we don't get affected. Now it's the opposite way. Like, people who get put masks together, I mean, for a lot of days, that's a solid reality. That's how we should be. Like when who you are is kind of misinterpreted that way. Like be yourself, do not be your emotion, be your true self. But in order to do that, there is a lot of uncovering we have to do. But
Yeah.
that's the journey. So it's talking like this, it's brings out the things that I could do better in my life. And in that way I do agree with Krishnamurti what you said. More times I think it's very much the projection of us
Right.
rather than actual interaction. And what you said at the beginning of the conversation with respect to MDMA, I think we kind of stop the pretension, we stop the projection, and we actually connect. Right, it happens
Yeah.
very rarely. And I used to not accept this, because there is always the spiritual ego that I can connect better with people. But then the sooner I accept these truths about myself, it's easier for me, because things are not going to, just because I intellectually say that I'm better, I'm not going to be better. I actually have to do the work. And this kind of ties up with your thing about DARPA, by the way. Is that the defense thing?
The book. I'm sorry.
No. The experiment you said about the anesthetics and the psychedelics, right?
Right.
That's you said DARPA or something.
DARPA. Yeah.
It's the
DARPA is
defense.
they're like the U.S. military
Yeah.
government, right?
Yeah. So I think that one, as it bypasses the place where we can actually do the work, right? We kind of tend to do the work in our stages of suffering. Like when things are good, I don't think anything happens. Like
Yeah.
I seriously feel like you're in a state of bliss, you experience it's all good, but nothing is gonna change. All bad things that might happen out of that is you can crave that state, but with no capability to do what's essential to do to attain that state without the influence of drugs. So
Yeah. It's fascinating to think about. Yeah. The DARPA one blows my mind because I think that you have to see it's seeing the things that don't make sense that create that change, at least in my mind. Like you have to have the difficult come up maybe, or you have to have the thoughts about it, or maybe you don't have to have the difficult come up, but it is the change in the way you physically feel. I don't know, like the experiments, I can't wait to read them. I think that there's an issue there, but yeah,
I feel like it's as small as hiking a mountain, right? Like
okay.
it's one thing getting lifted and put at the peak. Yeah,
Yeah.
you can see, but you're it's still not the same. You can feel ecstatic about it. Oh, I'm at the top of the mountain and so on. But the one who does the work of climbing every step is gonna feel different.
Right.
These are inexplicable things, but what is actually happening at their level of consciousness is going to be much different than getting dropped off at the peak.
Right.
And I read this another article yesterday. I didn't read, I just saw the title, sorry.
Right.
But it said, I think it went like people are inventing drugs like psychedelics where you can trip without tripping. And it
Yeah.
was weird. And so how do we distinguish which part? Like for example, in cannabis we have narrowed down these set of components which kind of puts you high, and then there are components which helps with the bodily things, let's say CBD and THC, right?
Right.
But I don't know if we have still, like, we are trying to do that with psychedelics, but it's just so funny to me because personally I think weed seems simpler to do. With psychedelics, it's just crazy. So which part is actually helping us is going to be difficult to find.
Yeah.
Like you don't know. It doesn't have to be the excessive serotonin. Sorry for cutting you, but it doesn't have to be the excessive serotonin boost, right? Because there came a paper recently saying that depression might not be due to lack of serotonin as what we have believed so far, right? It could be. You never know. So it might not just be that thing that keeps producing serotonin might be doing the trick. So what essentially does the trick, and how we are going to narrow it and take it out. And the question comes, why do we want to do it? That's the important part. Like, why are we trying to do that? And I feel like it's the part that is completely against our level of existence. Like in this plane of reality, I used to think about this when I fill water at my work. Right, it's a very slow tap. Takes almost like 1.5 minutes to fill this 1 liter. Right, like, and I'm like holding this, and then there is this thought: I want this instantly done. Then where do I draw the line? Because then I want to instantly eat, I want to instantly finish the work at 4:30 p.m., I want to instantly do this. Then what is getting done? I want to then we will instantly die. So there is no life happening without, the whole life is happening during the waiting period, right? We are always waiting without being tied up to the result of the outcome of what we are waiting for.
Right.
We can wait for things, just
Yeah.
jolly wait for things.
It reminds me, I read a quote on something you posted that talked about, process versus goals. And like we create these goals to get to, but they're just an arbitrary thing. Like the actual life is in the process. And
Yeah.
I read that right before I went to bed. And then I had a dream about that. Like I woke up with this aha moment, like, oh my God, it's just, and it's not really that, even though I thought it was an aha moment, like more than I think about it, it's like, yeah, it's just what they were talking about. But it's just this idea of life is process. And it gets back to what you said earlier. Like that is the freeing part of it. If you just realize it's not about getting somewhere, it's not about attaining anything. It's about the process of that. Like the goal, the thing, the shiny object is more of just that, a shiny object, where the process of getting to it is the real gold. And that's the freeing moment. And I think that that's what frees us, is like, hey, that thing that you're worried about trying to do, you're doing it right now. You should enjoy it, because that's the thing you're doing. It's the thing you're supposed to be doing right now, is the attainment of the thing. It's not the thing at the end of the tunnel, because there is no end of the tunnel. There is no, it's just a bright light, it's, but yeah, it's fascinating. And I must have read that right before I went to bed, because, I woke up thinking about it. But yeah, it's the process. It's the idea of life around us unfolding in every step. That's the beauty. And if you can enjoy it, if you can be thankful for it, it's whether you're filling up a water bottle and having a few moments to be there. I don't know. I guess it's like the
Where
Eckhart
will
Tolle.
this realization happen if I didn't have, if I had an instant water filler, or if I had someone who would fill my water? Then where am I actually stopping and reflecting, right? And so yeah, those are periods. I think personally for me, it has changed to observing. So it's still not present moment. You're still thinking about present moment, but I feel like for me, I have gotten better in at least being here thinking about this than being somewhere else, right? Like, what can I do after I fill my water? I think meditation changes that aspect. So it's going to come, especially when you sit. You should try when you go and sit for 1 hour, and sometimes your mind rushes and you realize time moves at the same speed. And especially when you go for the 10-day retreat, oh, it's so scary, and it's your peak boredom. You want to like pull your hair, you want to run away, because you're sitting for this 1 hour sit, and suddenly you want to like do things faster, right? Let's say you're aware of your sensations, you want to get it done, and then this thought pops up. Okay, I get it done, I go outside, pee, and I come back and I sit again. So what's I'm just gonna keep doing this for the rest 10 days. So you when you create that space, you actually add these things. The same what you said with taking shrooms almost every day, right? What you want to see as a withdrawal from the surrounding, it's beautiful that you see it as a not a good or a bad thing.
Right.
It's a neutral thing. It is as it is, and we can use it for our own good. When it is bad is because is only cases where you're at a place where people are drowning and people are getting hurt, and you just watch like, nah, not today, I'm gonna enjoy myself. Those are the moments. But more often than not, if you're consciously, if things are fine, it's one of the best things we can do given the amount of distractions we have. Withdraw.
Yeah. And it's necessary. I think there's so much competing for our attention, and that made me. So this brings me to a quote one of your friends brought up. Your friend Adrian Gerlach brought up this quote that says, Robot dogs are guarding events, and students are asking if Chat GPT can write their
Yes,
lab
yes, student
reports.
reports.
What
Yeah.
an interesting world to be alive in. Like, there's
Yeah.
so much distractions. Like, look at all this happening. Like, what do you think about when I say that quote?
Beautiful. Before we go into this,
Yeah.
he was my professor for my master program.
Okay.
Like, I'm so thankful to him till date. Like that would never go because I did zero work and he didn't remove me off. He was always very helpful, very open minded. He was, I've heard before coming, Canadian are nice people, but you could meet, again, these there is always exceptions to rule, but he was like whatever ideas I had, he was that person. And you know regardless of the things that I've done, he still helped me complete my masters. And that's the only reason I'm still here in Canada, because there would be no other way to continue living here. So I'm so I think I was one of the things I had towards him was so much guiltiness until like 2 years back or even till last year. Then one day I thought, this is enough. I'm gonna call him, and then we talked about how how was the worst investment that he has ever made for a student. He could have spent that time and money on someone else, and anyone would have done a better job. But yeah, coming back to that, it is funny, right? Like it's just interesting times we live in. And with respect to chat GPT, I see a lot of writers especially coming up with this. This week has been very interesting for me. I just can't stop thinking about it. My job is gonna be taken away by chat GPT. I still haven't personally used it, but I did read a lot of things posted on LinkedIn, and it's quite interesting. Have you
Yeah.
and did you do anything with chat GPT?
I haven't done. I've spoken to many people who have, and
Yeah.
I've heard some interesting ideas about it. And I on one level, I still think it's like a compiler. Like, it just goes out and like takes other people's stuff and puts it together. And I guess on some level I could see how it can be a threat, but I see it more of a tool. I see it more of like something people can use to build upon, like a platform. And I've seen some interesting people. I think it has a problem with understanding reality and truth. And I spoke to one gentleman who had asked it why washing machines were able to get Donald Trump elected. And it gave this reason why washing machines had played a pivotal role in getting Donald Trump elected. So it doesn't really have a good grasp on like the true reality of what's happening. And I think that the more people, once people get over the once they get over that of it, they're gonna go, yeah.
And that's one more thing about us humans, right? Like the immediate change, we react to the immediate change, and then once it becomes a normal thing, like yeah, it's whatever.
Yeah.
my bills are consistent. I would rather be focused on that.
Right.
I still think like these features, because if you personally ask me, I would do the same with respect to what you mentioned, the chat GPT compiler is doing. Like I do not have new ideas. I see the world, I put things together, and that's what the machine is doing. And pretty much I feel like that's what's happening. Like there is what we call as inventions and discoveries. Or inventions are just hidden discoveries.
Yeah.
So it's just there is nothing we invent. Things are that we just play with the combinations and so on. And I think it's a good starting point if we have something that is gonna keep doing that, and eventually one day, like, I can put any two pieces together without having that limit condition.
Yeah. In some ways, I think it's.
I feel like sorry. Yeah. I'm sorry. Your voice got delayed. Continue, please.
I was just saying, like, I think that much like what you're saying, it's not so much about us inventing new things as it is just new combinations of things. And if you look at it from that angle, it's not really taking away any writer's job. It's just allowing them to change the way the outcome is going to look. you're just switching the order of things. And so the writer, the talented writer, is just going to be able to use this as a new combination of things moving forward. And if you pan back a little bit and see, okay, the same thing's happening with artwork, the same thing's happening with writing. So it's not so much that the future is going to be, it's not so much, you can get a good look at what the future is going to look like by understanding that we're putting together new combinations of things. So, you're still going to be in the ring throwing punches, but you're not going to throw a left, right. Now you're going to throw like a uppercut, right, knee to the face. You know what I mean? It's just going to be a different set of combinations. So maybe if you put it in terms of language, like, you can't come up. Here's a good thought experiment that I think embraces it. If I ask you to create a brand new monster, Ranga, can you do it? Like, tell me a monster that never existed that you just made up. Tell me one, like, make one up for me right now.
Ego.
Okay, there you go. Well done. That's it. That's what it comes down to,
I guess. But you're right about what you said with ChatGPT. It's all tools. It's the combinations of these things. One doesn't replace the other. That's what we always think, right? Like that fear leads to the thought. But when we are in a state of love, we see possibilities. We don't see extinction. We see possibilities. Like, okay, this is that. So how can I hate him or her, or how can they hate me, right? Like, now we just have a distinction between, like, humans can help each other, but AI, we just talk in a very primal level of, like, they might take over us. What's taking over? We're already taken over. We're either taken over by something or the other,
Right.
Something happens in the sky, something happens to the whole planet, we're gone, we're taken over. So doesn't matter. Enjoy the time we get and do things what we can.
Yeah. It's so true. It's just part of us. It's just another dimension opening up for us to explore. And it is whatever you say it is. Oh, is it a demon? Yep. Is it an angel? Yep. It is.
The choice is yours,
Yeah.
The tiny part is where I think our freedom lies. Most of the things can be very predetermined, right? Like I've been interested in reading the spiritual side of how they are trying to arrive at this predetermined notion of the world, in which karma works, where that you cross that line of having that awareness to say, enough of karma, I'm going to take up my thing. But then the cause and effect just doesn't stop like that. Still contributing to a lot of things, right? But it's still, you define freedom in that space of predetermined motion. It's the paradox, I believe. Like, both exist at the same time. I have zero free will and I have complete freedom.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's amazing. Like, again, that's one more thing which is freeing, right? When we think about journey rather than the destination, because destinations I was never fascinated by destinations because one, I didn't go to, so I was always craving for it. But I was craving it so much, with so much expectations. When I went there, it was so fleeting. Because, like, whole bus ride, let's say if I'm going to go to a beach, I'm thinking about it. Then I go 2 hours beach, it's still not enough for me. I want more, right? I want more. So it's not enough. So what do I do? Right? So I have to change where I can get these, whatever I was looking for at the beach, am I able to get it everywhere? Then, as you said, it all becomes, it becomes freeing. So I have this t-shirt. See, thank you for nothing.
I love it.
Yeah. It's to further avoid disappointment.
There's a lot going on there.
Yeah.
It reminds me, I I once heard someone talking about a bumper sticker, but the story is someone saw a bumper sticker that says, man thinks, God knows, man thinks. There's like a lot going on there. Like, does that, like, it reminds me of your shirt. Thank you for nothing. There's like, how do you interpret that? Like, how do you interpret when I first heard that story? Like, man thinks God knows. Does that mean that man thinks that God knows everything, or does that mean man thinks that God knows? But it just comes down. The point I'm trying to make is interpretation. Whether it's a trip to a destination or whether it's a trip that you go on internally, like and it gets us back to language. Like, sometimes I think it's weird. We talk about the psychedelic experience as a trip because it is on all aspects a trip. Like, you're going somewhere. Or you think about when people get high, like, what does it mean to be high? Well, usually it means that you're looking down at yourself. And how many times I've been high so many times and thought about my life from a different perspective, that could be considered getting high. And so I just think that there's a lot in the way we see ourselves. There's a lot in the way we see the world. And maybe it just comes back down to language and thinking and being thankful for nothing.
I wouldn't agree with that part. Thank you for everything would be something I've changed. But the class or whatever it's there, I 100% support. We bring up our own disappointments. I think this was something, again, it's very common. It's a very common reminder to me because on psychedelics, one thing I've noticed is, at least consciously, I do not have expectations at that moment. Right?
That's a great point.
At least consciously, right? There could be subtler notions of these expectations of this is how things should be, but it frees up the space in your consciousness, right? And I'm not disappointed. And so when I'm sober and I get disappointed or any kind of uncomfortable sensation, I'm like, what expectation did I have? Why did I think things would go this way? Right? Like, let me see. Right? And it's so hard. Like, the moment you're not aware of just what is, aware of what are the unspeakable, you're just gonna have expectations. You're gonna play it out based on the past.
Yeah.
It's so hard to that thing is there in DNA, and even I am like 50-50 on reincarnation stuff, but I believe in the part where so much information is carried in DNA, right? And it's been passing for years and years and years, and without the right set of people doing the right set of untangling stuff, you just have a lot more work to do. There is reactions happening at very subtler levels, right? And with respect to this psychedelics, just another thought popped up.
Yeah.
So one of the things what meditation was explaining, at least the teacher S.N. Goenka was explaining, was our subconscious is reacting, and when you stop reacting, the subconscious, you become conscious of your subconscious. It's not subconscious anymore, right? You start teaching. The subconscious is handling information based on past events, right? It has to survive. So this is how we reacted last time, so I'm going to react the same way, and energy is being consumed every single time, right? And when you're meditating and when you get to that part, your subconscious, your body is reacting to the pain, your body is reacting to this particular form of sensation. This particular thing I don't want. And when we stay with it, it is hard, but when we stay with it, I feel like that subconscious space that is reacting now turns up to you and says, oh, you're present now, I give up the power to you, right? That creates that space. So what was, if you want to see it as a vertical thing, your conscious space processing is this much, right? And as you go down, you have more space to handle information, right? And once you create enough space, so when in a real life situation, when a reaction is happening, you tend to see it as the subconscious doing, and you talk with your subconscious rather than interact with the world and say, oh, you're not supposed to do that. That's unnecessary. Because it's for him or it comes back to tickets or whatever, right? Dressing and so on. Because instead of people telling other people, oh, you're making me uncomfortable, like, no, I simply cannot make you uncomfortable. Your subconscious is making you uncomfortable. We tend to see to our subconscious and say, I'm here now. Why are you reacting, right? And then all the subconscious wants is like, oh, I need you to be here. Just because you're not here, I had to do this work. I don't like working. So if you're here, well and good. And slowly, when we stop reacting at so many, levels, I think it just frees up our consciousness to process information in a very healthy way, or in the way it would be where you're just there.
Yeah, that's really well put. I've never thought about it from that angle before. But yeah, it's so many times it's so cliche to hear someone in a lower state say things like, "See what you made me do?" Or anytime you say that someone else is responsible for your anger, for your pain, for anything, like that is a ridiculous statement, because only you have the ability to make you feel any way at all, right? Like that's the reactive state where you're allowing someone to have power over your feelings. That's kind of ridiculous. But I never thought about DNA and karma being linked like that. Like, it does make a lot of sense that the way in which the people who came before you were trained, or had a stimulus response, you too would have that stimulus response if that was never if it was never taken the time to solve a problem. That problem is kind of passed down to the kids. Like, is that am I making that assessment right? Are you saying that DNA and karma are linked in a way like that?
Karma is a more of a bigger picture, I would say, in the sense that it involves more of the interactive nature of the world. For example, if you want to believe in reincarnation and karma, right? Let's say you start a fire today in Hawaii and you kill yourself, right? Tomorrow you're born to a parent in Hawaii only, and that fire reaches you and kills you. That's karma. Right? You did it for yourself, right? It's a simpler way to explain it, but it doesn't have to be that simple. But in DNA, what I mean is more so with respect to particular traits and features, right? For example, I have this particular curly hair because my dad and mom got that particular genes, right? So I carried it. I don't have a straight hair. Same with these particular things. A lot more is happening. Subtler reaction, right? After all, like, if you see from the viewpoint of quantum physics, right, everything is made of these quarks joining together to form electron circling the proton and neutron to form an atom, and it keeps growing on and on. But the primal reaction that's happening at every single minute specimen, it's the same. It's all the same, right? So it just, when it builds up together, we tend to perceive things in a different way. But that's why when more times when we are in psychedelics or stuff, we are able to go into the deeper parts. Like, when we say deeper, it's just we narrow it down, right? Through that narrowing down, through that, I think this ties to one of our conversation about, through that specialization, we kind of reach the one, the god, or the everything. So I think in that way, DNA does 100% affect, as well as generational trauma, right? It kind of
Sure.
passes because of, people, that there is, when I was reading psychology, right, they say that most of the, um, some people simply are born in such a way that their happiness doesn't go over 50%. Their biochemical mechanism is in such a way, and that when they interact with this world in a particular thing, and the world event can act as a trigger which can lead to a particular form of response, right? It could be depression due to the biochemical makeup of the body, right? So if those things can happen along with the particular set of situations that's created in your family, of course, like, that's the first place we need to work at, right? We need to stop those things, right? And that's the funny part. We're going to take time to find out what's the healthy way to uh, drop a particular issue, right? The small line of difference between letting go versus suppression. Am I putting it deep down again in my subconscious, or am I truly letting it surface up and I'm letting go, right? And you play with a lot of set of methods to figure out what is comfortable for you. And once I think you find it, you just stick to it with all you got.
What do you think is the difference between suppression and surrender?
In what aspect? Difference for me is basically that, yeah, suppression is pretty much what you think. Like at that moment you feel okay, right? You can convince yourself you're not angry, that. And when you surrender, you're not angry, so you don't know if you're telling the truth. But when it's resurfacing up again and again, then it's a form of suppression. So I felt like I've done that over the course of last 2-3 years, where because I still don't know what I'm doing with my insight, because there is no rule book, there is no particular way to do things. No one teaches you. There is no way to communicate what meditation is. Like, everyone says you sit and you will know. You won't know. And no, like, you can give an outline of, okay, this might how you would be doing it. As I said, you can never directly point the finger there, so you kind of like go around circle. When you're going through that, you might find your own way, because if I point directly, it's not going to happen in this lifetime, right? So it's the same with our head. And letting go in certain states can be so easy, but it also can mean that you're free of it right now, but it's there. So how do you process it? Something like, I don't have a right answer. It's trial and error. I'm still doing my part in fixing those things within myself, and it's funny. It takes time, and after a point, you just stop. Uh, you understand. I feel like you have these things. Acknowledgement is the first part, right? So even if something you've truly surrendered, it's fine to say you still have it. I have anger issues towards something,
Yeah.
because what you say is not the truth. What is happening experientially is the truth. If I say something about your daughter, like, you can have a calm face, but your body might be boiling with anger,
Yeah.
right? So that's your truth, not what you portray to the world. So it will take time to slowly see what we can do. Yeah.
Yeah, surrender's a tough one for me. There are plenty of things that I've had to surrender to, but I don't know that I've ever been happy about surrendering to them.
Interesting. Would you want to continue, or if you want to
Well,
leave
yeah,
it?
it just makes me think, like, I think that the idea of surrender for me carries with it an inherent weakness. And it's that weakness that is difficult for me to embrace. I know it's there, and I know that there are things that it is silly to not surrender to, but there's still too much fight in me to thoroughly let go. And I think that to me is where I'm doing my most learning, is
Yeah.
understanding that difference right there. And I know where that fight is for me, but I don't know. It just still has such a negative connotation to me. But I think that just means that's where the work is.
Yeah. It's good, right? Like, you have these set of ideas, and instead of assuming that you have an answer and you're settling for it, there is definitely work for us to do, keep on doing, right? At the psychological level, I mean. And it's good to have these starting points,
Yeah.
right? And most of the uh, ego part that is developed by the world, right, kind of sees surrender as a weakness. Same with seeing the becoming nobody, right? The ego doesn't want to be a nobody, wants to be that special thing. So for that, thinking about nobody is so terrifying. Like, how can I be nobody, right? But the ego is not us, right? It's just a set of habit patterns, set of defense mechanisms, set of subconscious reactions that are happening to keep us alive till this part where we can look at them and say, "You've taken me so far. I just don't need you," right? Not anymore. And it doesn't. I do believe this paradoxical thing of, like, trauma processing happens almost instantaneously, right? When we know the art of letting go, it happens instantaneously. Because
Yeah.
I was watching this video of Sadhguru the other day, like, when there is no distance to travel, if you're already sitting and I ask you to sit, like, it doesn't take any time, right? You're not doing stuff. Same with our mental world. I feel like enlightenment and stuff happens in 1 second, right? Letting go of stuff happens but it's more about, again, that's the destination, right? Let's say, if
Right.
it's the journey of going back and forth, the pendulum, right? which is my, where is the gravity of my particular pendulum, that it's, which is the middle point for me, right? I have to explore my whole range to see this is the balance, the middle path for me to walk on. And yeah, if you consciously know that surrendering is not a bad thing, and it's just a defense mechanism that comes up saying that, oh, surrendering will make us weak. I feel like the truest of power resides only when you surrender. Like you completely let go of what you thought anything was, which
Right.
means even the concept of surrender, right? Like we cannot, I have an idea of surrender would be like this is how I would like, that's why in India you can see all these, it's great thing, if you are coming out from a culture like the Hindu, where people do have a lot of offerings and stuff. They pour tons of milk on statues, and offer foods, fruits, flowers, and whatnot, right? So these are forms of surrendering, like offering, right? Charity. But all these originates again at a very individual level. We have to do it with our thoughts, we have to do it with our action. In Bhagavad Gita, there is a line which says, Krishna says to Arjuna that, uh, do your work and give the fruits of the outcome to me, dedicate your fruits of the outcome to me, right? It's more so with respect to that. It again comes to this, it's all circles around the same part. Like, don't be worried about what happens in the end, because there is no actual physical god we are going to give certain things to. You want to get a
Right.
job, promotion, right? These are fun. When Bhagavad Gita says offer the fruits of that, like, where do you go and do this? It's all a mental concept to make us understand that, let go of what's going to happen out of this, but do it very mindfully, very intentionally, very much with whatever process you're doing. Don't worry what happens in the end, right? And
Yeah.
it's great you started a new chain of thing for me with respect to, I do wonder once in a while, it's like, how much of this is suppression? Am I just suppressing it? Once in a while, I
Right.
really go like fully crazy. I sit and I'm like, what if the world is right? What if I'm wrong? What if I've been like completely stupid and doing these set of things, thinking that this is the right thing, and then I'm like, I'm slightly losing it, right? And again, there are defense mechanisms that helps you, and sometimes defense mechanisms are gonna help you the way towards the goal you're set, and not against it, right? So, and then I think about certain things of people getting enforced into doing things they don't want, and then I think, maybe I'm not completely wrong. Of course I can have a few things to change, and then I'm like, it's too much of thinking. Just don't get lost in thought. This is getting lost in thought, and you're going in circles again and again. And that's the thing, right? It's not circle when you see it from the top, but when you see it from this side view, it's like spiral, which is going, which is slowly moving towards
Right.
something, right? And it'll take time, a lot of, and I one thing, I've never believed that there is something humans need to possess, but I've felt more so grateful, and I felt like gratitude came to me when I'm learned patience. So when we have patience is the only virtue, right? It kind of helps you with everything, because I today, as of the second, all I can think my problem is I rush. I just
Mhm.
rush. My mind is rushing towards the next thing. Apart from that, there is no problem. Because if something is happening and if I'm with it, there is no narrator to say this is good. I don't want this to be happening for another 23 minutes and 34 seconds. Yeah, sorry for counting the first 36 minutes of the meditation, but I, I, yeah, it's the problem comes to specifically that, oh, I'm not here, I'm not here. And when you're here, it's, I guess it's beautiful. And patience is something that we need to have. It's a very, again, when you, if you do give it a try, I would definitely totally recommend to you that you should try to find a place and book for the 10 days that I'll find for you if they have a branch in Hawaii, or maybe we
Yeah.
can talk with the foundation and start one in Hawaii. But
Yeah, that'd be epic.
go, like, I'd be down when I see people like, especially you, I know, right? Like, I'd feel you. Like, I want you to feel really miserable. I want you to feel like I want you to run away. It doesn't have to happen that way. But if you did feel, I would actually be happy for you. I want you to be miserable, George. Like, really miserable.
You're so kind. Oh, I know that, like, I've done a similar thought experiment, or I've been caught in a similar set of thoughts where I have run that road of, like, I'm doing everything wrong, and, like, I've stayed there. But for what pulls me out of there, like, I'll stay in that circle of thought sometimes for, off and on a day or a couple of days sometimes. And what always snaps me out of it is the fact that regardless if I'm doing it wrong or I'm doing it right, I'm going to end up at the same spot. And then I start laughing. And that's usually what pulls me out. But I can go deep into that spiral and be like, that's all wrong. It's all fucking wrong. Why would I do that? That's so dumb. I've been doing that forever. And then all of a sudden, after a few days, I'm like, well, I'm still in the same spot that I was like a month ago. So maybe I'm doing it right. Then I just start laughing like that was a total waste of time. I just wasted a month. And then the spiral will start again. And then the psychedelics have to get involved. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think
it's so crazy.
This is beautiful. Like, you spend there, and these are the things, right? What you feel like. I am speaking for you a little bit, but what you would consider waste of time kind of turns out to be the most significant thing you do, right? Like, you kind of go into a next cycle trip, and you think, like, one thing that happened to me personally was having no regrets. You simply cannot regret anything. Like, if your goal is towards, let's say, like a particular thing, like if it's with meditation towards enlightenment, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you are born enlightened, what would you do? And if you're not born enlightened, of course you're going to have these trauma. Everyone is going to be traumatized. Trauma can be a very small thing. Trauma can be very big thing. Trauma can be very impactful. Trauma can be very slight. I'm not overusing that word, but I think in some way we all need to have that bit of thing that kind of gets us to a place where we're like, but why me? Why am I being put through this? Who is doing this to me, right? We need to get to that space. But when we truly get there, I feel like we don't look back and say it was a waste of time, because what else could have happened if not for that? I cannot think of anything. Like, my mind is so limited to think of alternate possibilities of what could have rolled out. If I had taken a left, I would have got smashed by a car. If I had taken a right, I would have hit by a train. Like, I went straight. I tripped on a stone, so big deal. I'm still here. When the fire happened, this happened in our house, right? So all the firemen, like, there were 35 firemen in our house, right? 6 trucks, because the properties we're living in is all attached properties. But only one fire truck was needed, 10 seconds of water was needed, but they were prepared, right? And police came and fire investigation and so on and on. And there was intense panic for first 2 minutes. And then when we got off the house, and it was like, yeah, whatever, right? We were fine. And then there was this part of just such compassion that I felt like I needed this particular experience that I was lacking, right? There are events that are happening. I intellectually know that my food is arriving from somewhere, like someone is working, and that's how I'm able to eat. Someone is doing something. Someone is always doing something for me to continue breathing as of this point. Like, the internet that's there that connects us, everything is happening. Intellectually, I know, but I had to be put through that very experientially, where I had to drop my thinking of, oh, I know people are helping me. I actually had to experience that. Such a fucking dependent being. Where did the arrogance come from, right? And from, I don't know where it started, but all the people that came, none of them asked. None of them said, "Oh, it shouldn't have happened. It's avoidable fire or this or that." Nothing. They're like, "You two and the dogs are 3 dogs are alive. Great. House can always be reconstructed." And that's true, because when you see it, and that's why I said that fear of death, when it arises, it's an opportunity for us to start No, we necessarily don't have to wait for a near-death experience for us to change our lives. But sometimes that's the wake-up calls, Yeah.
Yeah. I think I don't know whether if it's because I've been talking to you since our relationship started or it's psychedelics, but in the last couple year and a half or so, I occasionally get this feeling. Like yesterday I was at work and I was walking up these stairs and I'm like, I'm going to die. Not like I was going to die that day, but like there was like this weird sense of urgency that just for a moment shot through me like I'm going to die. But it was not so much like an adrenaline rush as it was like a shot of clarity, maybe like a quick release of dopamine or a quick release of serotonin that was like, yeah, I'm gonna die. And it just for a minute, everything around me got brighter.
Yeah.
And so it was a welcome thought, even though it was a scary thought, but it something to be embraced, something to be thought about. And when you bring up the idea of talking about wasted time and how that's probably some of the best times, because there can be no wasted time. It reminds me of a psychedelic trip I had one time under like a really large dose of 4-ACO DMT. I remember taking it and like I immediately felt it come on, like it, and like I'm like, whoa, this is gonna be strong. Like I just took this and it's 5 minutes in and I'm coming up. I'm like, oh crap, And on a side note of a side, I'm sorry.
Was it the 75 mcg?
Yes, that was it. That was the one.
Okay,
it was like immediate.
Yeah.
And I remember I'm like, okay, I'm gonna get in the bathtub because that's a great idea. So I remember I turned on the water, and it was one of the first times and one of the only times where I started hearing voices. Like I had broken through some sort of barrier, and like I'm like, okay, I need to think of an intention. And my intention was I want to understand what's happening in the world. And I want to understand what is on a level I've never understood before. And so all of a sudden I'm in the bathtub and I'm curled up in the corner and the water's on. And like, I'm like, I want to understand what's happening. And then all of a sudden I heard this voice, like, are you sure you want to understand? And I'm like, what? I'm scared. I'm like, what? Who said that? And it's like, and I'm like, yeah, I'm sure. And then I just got all these flashes of like war and people dying and like all this crazy like visions. Like I'm like, holy shit. And I'm like, I don't want to understand anymore. And the voice is like, too late. But it made like, it was just this, like, the reason I bring it up is because I realize like all these things are happening. Everything is happening around me. And the concept of time was just really brought out in a way in which I've never thought about before. And then you enter into this faceless voice pinging into my head, like, wow. So like, I think the reason I'm bringing that up is the idea of time, that there can be no waste of time, and the things that you may feel, whether it's a thought loop or whether it is sitting and meditating or whether it is obsessively thinking about something that you think was silly, they're all necessary. And it brings me to this point of whenever someone says to you, is that necessary? I think the answer should always be, yeah, it is necessary. That's kind of a crazy way to get there, but yeah.
There is no crazy way. So all path leads to home. It doesn't matter what.
Yeah. There you go. That's well put. Thank you. Thank you.
That is one more thing. There was this part where like different methods, certain methods are stupid, certain methods are this. But I think everything is happening to a particular individual at the right time, right? What might not be here as the most optimum learning experience, right? Like for example, I don't know how many people I can say that the fire I started in my house was the most greatest event that I could think of, like in this year. Like beautiful beginning to new year. It just rearranged my priorities. It was the most kindest event without great consequences. Like things could have been much worse. So I just had the experience of like, fuck, what could have happened without things happening, right? Like let's say my dog, which was both of them 1 meter away from the fire, right? Like they first get burnt. Like things like this, small things like this could have happened, right? But to escape that near without having those consequences made me just have so much gratitude towards the experience, right? And from there on about, like, I feel like people are we have it's everything is perfect. Everything is perfect at some level of, plane of existence that we cannot comprehend. Something that's happening that is so inhumane. I know there could be a lot of, examples that could say, how could you say that is okay, right? Because I do have that, but it's just when I'm completely silent, when I'm completely not interacting with the world, these are the things. It is actually perfect. It is what leads to a state of whatever, your aha moment or anything. And one thing you told about time, I think I would have mentioned this, but in 1754, when England changed their calendars, do you know?
No.
So there was, I think, in 1754, if I'm not wrong, the Chinese calendar and the English calendar were 16 days apart.
Okay.
So on September 14, they said, so instead of tomorrow being September 15, we're gonna have October 1st, right? And there was a huge protest, right? That give us our time back,
Wow.
right? And I understand the effects of it, right? So let's say if the calendar year is just changed for you, George, right? You live in January 24 now, like I live in 27. Then when you're interacting with me, it's a problem, right? But if you are a monk who's sitting in a mountain who's not dependent on interactions, then it's a totally different thing, right? So the more interactions we have, the more distractions it creates. Not necessarily a bad thing, but it just proves to the point that the solitude time is of quite importance, right? Like, I used to wonder, before my psychedelics, have I ever been alone? No, I have not been truly alone with myself. It's so funny to think about, like, what do I always look for things to do? I always look for people to interact with, do something of these sorts. But why was I not alone? Because mostly the 2-3 days when I first moved to Canada, that was the first days that I've ever been alone. Like, I always lived in my parents' home until I came to Canada. So you're interacting, right? You're always interacting with beings and so on. And when I came here, I cried. I've never cried, in that intensity until then. And I just went to the bed and I cried. I'm like, I don't want to be alone. Right? And I had no idea these are experiences that I needed to be aware of. I just
Yeah.
cried. And then I was like, I can handle this. And then, morning will be fine. There is just evening sadness, but it will go away. And then if I make friends, it will go away. These things. But it's the same with our eating disorders, or watching disorders or distractions which are covering up our emotions, right? So when we stop those, initially it'll be hard, because all the emotions that are suppressed has to surface now. Where will it go? There is nowhere. Either it goes deep inside or it has to come out. And coming out is always in the form of, like, us experiencing it. And if once we understand, we don't have to react to the experience of particular emotion, we don't act upon it, right? We take it. But again, I feel like all these happens when we give ourselves the space, the space, solitude, non-interaction with the outside world, to truly understand what is time. Time exists for a conventional purpose, like, for a matter of convenience, to make it easier. But beyond that, is there something? Even days, nights, these don't matter. If one is meditating all day, not eating, there is a term called samana, which I read recently, that no, again in the Sadhguru video, where Buddha, before his enlightenment, he was traveling with different teachers to get different practices. He felt it was not enough, right? So he turned to this approach of, there were group called samanas, who would say they will never beg for food, right? So they are fighting against their primal instincts of, I need to survive. So if they are given food, was at that time in such a way that when people see monks, they just offer a lot of food. So it turned out to be a good thing for them to exist at that
Right.
point. But where I'm getting at is to the part that when we actually I have zero interactions of those sorts with respect to I need to eat at this time, or what if I stop completely eating, right? And time doesn't actually bother us the way we used to perceive time. We get a totally new different thing, and these methods that seem hard on the outside are methods that put you through complete presence, because all you care about is that particular moment that is there in that moment, because you're not thinking that, we all have things to do. Like, for example, I'm gonna go get my license plate for my other car, right? And it's always there, and even if you're not conscious of it, it's there in the back of the head. It's consuming energy, right? And this is how this energy, you can talk about in physical terms how we can stop wasting those energy, even though I said we don't waste time. So, like, yeah, uh, redirect it to much of what is actually happening here and now. I
Yeah.
know. I'm sorry, I was gibberish here and there, but it just, I, as much as things are happening, I'm observing the words that's coming out through me. I'm like, whoa, like, why are you going all about? But it's okay, whatever, do whatever you want.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I agree with so much of that idea. I think that when you are alone, I had a similar experience when I first moved to Hawaii and I had left my family and I realized I was in a place that, and it was during the holidays for me. Like, it was the first holidays where I realized that I don't know anybody here. I've never been here in my life. I'm living with people I don't know. My family's all gone and there's only me. And it was a profound sort of loneliness, but it gave way to a profound sense of being okay. Like, but you had to go to the spot of despair. Like, if despair was a location, I would say that despair is a place you go to find out who you are, because
Yeah.
you have to go there. You have to go there and you have to cry at the well of ascension. You know what I mean? And like, but once you do it, it's almost like a meditation. It's almost like a prayer.
Yeah.
It's almost like you've given homage and your tears have begun to
And
fill this pond.
I also feel like that particular experience, denotes to a form of surrender, right? Like,
Yeah,
it
absolutely.
could be anything, a particular concept you want to surrender, that I need to have someone to, have a particularly good time, or I need to be doing this particular sort of thing during the holidays, to get
Yeah.
myself to be at peace or something. But yeah, you're so true. I love the part where you said where we go to find despair is where we find ourselves, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's it goes back to one more thing that I had, like, if we listen to our emotions, they're just trying to communicate to us, and all we have to do is listen and say, you could be apathetical to it, but you can just have no set of reaction to it, and then see, like, huh, I see. How
Maybe
did you
maybe
bring this sense of peace in the covering of, I don't want it? It's so funny. Like, I don't want it is the only resistance that's causing the suffering. There is no actual suffering apart from, if someone is doing something to us. Yeah, we can have a few options to act about that particular situations, but in essence, everything comes to, uh, yeah, let's talk about, just my life, where I don't have hard things. Like, I don't have people coming and hitting at me, or let's say I don't have people trying to kill me for speaking about women rights or so on, right? Think that too happen in this world. But so I have a rather very convenient life. So for me, the problems are with respect to once I'm settled in bed and I have to clear out a particular dish because the food will go bad. Or, like, that's a small task, you see. And thinking about it is, I don't want to do it because I've already settled in. But it's not. If you start, yesterday I had this was like literally last night, and it's so mind-blowing to me because it's such a simple thing. Nothing of profound nature is happening, I would think, but it's so profound because I'm like, I get up and I go, I'm like, ha, 3 days back I wouldn't have gotten up. Meditation is what makes me get up because I'm not resisting this, small things. And I think it helps me at least go and sit more. Sorry for still completely cutting you off, which you were saying with respect to this particular thing. I'm sorry about that, but
That is true. I think of the same thing with traffic. Like,
yeah,
I it's so irrelevant, really, but it sucks. I hate it. Like I'm just sitting on a freeway. I'm just gonna sit here. Yeah, I'm just gonna sit here. Oh, it's not that big of a deal. But so many people lose their mind when you sit in traffic. But why? Especially if you have a car with air condition and a radio, and you got somebody there next to you, maybe a little snack. Like what do you do? Who cares? You're just sitting in traffic. But people get so frustrated because traffic is kind of like life. Like you're in this rush to get somewhere, but you're still in the car. You can't go faster than the guy in front of you. You don't know why you're sitting in traffic. Maybe there's an accident. And that's another thing. People want to like see an accident. Like there better be an accident when I get up here. I hope there was something, people are so frustrated, but yeah, I
want to justify
so weird.
my wait.
What's that?
I want to justify the time I waited.
Yes. Yeah, it's true. And maybe this gets us back to, this gets us back to the line between surrender and suppression. When you sit alone, you are surrendering to your emotions and allowing them the time that they need to communicate with you. Where when you're acting out in your day and you're rushing from distraction to distraction, you're in suppressive mode where you're just, I'll get to that later. I'll get to that later. And that seems to be so much of the world of mental illness today is suppression, right? Like you've suppressed your anger. You've suppressed your animosity. You've suppressed your need to express yourself for so long that it's finding a way to manifest in a way that is inappropriate to life in the community, where surrender is sitting alone and being like, I have to work on this, or you know what, I need to take time to realize why I'm acting this way. I guess that gets us back to that fine line.
It definitely does, right? Like one of the things I think that was happening until now is as you said, the huge amount of distractions that have been growing around us, that are not just distractions per se, that are basing their whole profit based on our attention towards the particular distraction, right? So now you have someone going out there doing it on purpose, and it's a very valid thing because that's livelihood for them. So given that it does exist, and over the years it has increased tremendously, that we really do not even begin to understand. We don't have time like necessarily to ask question, why am I here, what we are doing. Most people, I feel like we tend to say that we are here for the experience, but are we really, right? Because I used to think I'm here for the experience, but that was being covered up with a lot of my concepts, right? So finding the thin line, it's going to take time. It goes back, and the line it always keeps moving. You think you can never get it nailed it down, or you can't have figured it. Like you think the method that you use to let go of, let's say, a grief towards a dead parent or a dead kid is not the same with respect to emotional abuse or stuff, right? All these have different levels of working. But it's funny, it's one thing I believe is it's an individual's work. I do like therapies. Those are initial journey, but therapies are for problems that we have already defined it and made a big deal. It's when it's hindering life in a major way, right? For example, I was, let's say, mildly depressed. That's what the DSM would quote my symptoms to be. But people like me, I feel like, do not have the right set of therapists to be helped, because I mean, on the outside, things are not a problem. You do not have suicidal tendencies. You're not, not showing up for work, or you're not. Things seem good on the outside, but you're
real fast. What did you say the DMS would classify you as?
Mildly depressed, based on
mildly depressed. Okay.
Mildly depressed, right? So the reason I'm saying is that when on the outside, if you do not have significant reaction patterns for people to observe, you don't get the right help you deserve. So after a while, when you take out all these major things, so for people having suicidal tendencies, that's more evident. People having, like, they just can't get out of bed, right? So these are very strong symptoms, right? And therefore the help is much more at least easier to deliver at these stronger levels. right? But for people with milder cases where things are fine, but they are not. So right, and then that's where the problem is. I saw a few, let's say, psychedelic companies, some therapists working towards helping people reach their full potential, which was nice to see, because not everyone has a problem as defined by the world. Someone could think that your life is as perfect as it could get, and you could be sad inside, right? And that's the funny thing about us. Everything can be traumatizing. All
Yeah.
life situations that are given to us is like, I only see my dad and myself in the case. My dad and me are completely opposite storylines, right? He was completely deprived of financial thing, so he had to fight his way to get there. So he made sure that I don't go through the same. And I saw him being this much. I said, I don't want money. And it's a loop, and it's funny to see these things happen.
It is. It's especially when you look at it from a generational point of view. It seems that one of us, like he's probably correcting in a way that his parent, like we always oversteer in the direction or overcorrect in the way that our parents did. You know, like my dad was super like, you are going to be this type, you're going to be the greatest wrestling athlete there ever was, and you're going to be super disciplined at this, and you're always going to do this. And I'm like, I can't do it. And so now, like, I still try to apply a certain level of discipline to my daughter. It's not the level of discipline that my dad did. And the reason he had so much discipline is because his parents had none. You know, so it's like we're just constantly steering the car until hopefully we get to a point where it's just, you know, there's not a whole lot of play in the wheel.
Yeah.
But it's interesting to think about. Like if you could look, see, we don't have we get back to this idea of time. Like we think that in our individual lives, like we're moving in this direction. But if you could be outside yourself and look at the lineage of your parents and then look at the lineage of where your kids might be, then you could see the plan. You'd be like, oh, that makes total sense. Like we started over here the same way, like the raindrops from a glacier flow down a mountain, so too do you as an individual go on your path. But you only get to see the snapshot of your life. You don't get to see your progeny, or you don't get to see the way your parents did it. And, you know, I like to think that at some point in time in this crazy sort of death and rebirths, maybe when we leave the body, then we'll be invited to see the big picture of where we're going, you know?
I don't think it's that. It won't be that.
Well, why not, Ranga?
Because I believe like it's just too easy. This is not how it doesn't set in with how this level of reality works, at least according to me, with respect to changes and with respect to energy being the only truth. And you know, we are a bundle of energy with receptors to a particular, you know, and we have these senses to see this world in a subjective way, and so on and on and on. But our work has to be done while we are here, right? I That's what I feel. It's not done while we are not here. Like there is no work to do when we are not here. There is no point to seeing things like once we go and see, like, okay, let's say, you know, there is this consciousness or spirit or soul which goes from the body at the moment of death and goes and sees, and then what? Nothing. It's like God is like, yeah, you go back again. But you know what? I'm gonna wipe out the memories again. Right? It's like that's what in Buddhism reincarnation kind of focuses on that. It's not about seeing the bigger picture, but kind of what state of consciousness you're left leaving the body. It's what you will go into the next body, right? So it's based on what when people are having that. I'm reading this book. I'm not reading this book. I read 3-4 chapters, which is very nice, by Art of Dying by S.N. Goenka. Talks about people, accounts from people who are dying, right? And which show was this? There was the show I was watching, and yeah, the thing with this guy and Alexander Shulgin, there is a documentary called Better Living Through Chemistry, right? And in that, this guy was describing the death of Alexander Shulgin, and he was saying, I've seen a lot of people die, and these are ugly deaths. And I saw Alexander die. It was very peaceful, and maybe it had to do a lot with his psychedelic experiences, right? And I tend to believe, because in Art of Dying, this book by S.N. Goenka were focused on people who are doing Vipassana meditation for quite some time, right? So they're able to have that state of meditation during that death. So they're not reacting to that fear that is rising as of the moment, right? Through the sensations or through their emotions, through their thoughts, and so on and on. And it's quite it was nice, because the day that thing caught on fire, I usually have a different set of routine in the evening, right? I go to take shower and so on. If I had done that, like, the house would have been on fire and I wouldn't have known, right? That day, for some reason, my partner, she was so interested in reading the book, she made me sit and read 3 chapters, during which we had enough time for the fire to catch, where we could notice and so on. And I was reading The Art of Dying, and there was something coming up, right? Because I was afraid, like, as I was reading that, there is this fear. I intellectually know I'm going to die. I intellectually know it'll be fine. Everyone is going to die. Nothing is going to happen. Like, let's say at some point this existence has to restart again in a different way. Like, the whole earth collapses. There is no written record of history and nothing, right? And again, life can start again. I can intellectually know these things, but when I'm reading this, there's something happening. My heart is racing and so on. And then I see the fire come up, and it was like, it was a huge reminder, and it had to all happen. And believe me or not, after that day, and I couldn't help myself but to sit and meditate, because I'm afraid, and I'm happy I'm afraid, because without me being afraid, I'm suppressing this fear deep down. And I'm not afraid all the time. Like, right now, if you ask me, I'm like, yeah, of course not. I'm not afraid of that. But I have to go and sit and ponder, especially when on cannabis, I have a lot of fear arising,
Yeah.
which is nice. And as you said, with respect to that death thought you had yesterday, it's quite important. We need to consistently, work on that, and it brings a sense of urgency in a very good way, right? It's a funny, again, a paradox thing. Urgency, not to get things done, not to rush. Urgency to stop being rushing, right? And
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know again where I started this conversation, but it all revolves around that, and makes me more yeah, the Art of Dying, right? With respect to that, it was just making me think I need to prepare for that. That is because what I true have understood for so long, but experientially now I've rediscovered the same truth is, when we are born, we do not know anything about any of such. We are given stories. This is what it is. This guy is that. This guy, and so on and on. And 99% of things turns out to be, oh no, I thought you were a very rude person. Oh, you also have, calming tendencies and so on. And none of those fits. But there is one truth. At least I felt like I've always known, is that death is coming. I don't know how it's gonna come. I don't know what I'm gonna do. I don't know if I'm gonna, you know, eat this particular food tomorrow. Nothing I know about life, but I know I'm going to die, right? And I feel like I wasted 3 years sometimes. Part of the paradoxical thing, right? I wasted because I knew death was something that was at the core of my thing. It was coming, and I wasn't doing anything to prepare for it, right? But then I don't see it as a waste of time, because, like, it's simply how things are rolling out, right? I had to be in this body to think about. I had to be in this body to understand that this body is going to die. So since I'm so attached to this idea of me and this body, I am going to die and I have to do the work. But if I couldn't have had this fear before my existence, what is death? Same as prenatal existence, right? I feel like it's the same, right? And death in such way, keeping that as a central truth, it's very nice. Like, all that scary feelings, but along with that scary feelings comes this presence, as you said, maybe the dopamine, maybe the serotonin. Things are brighter, they are richer, you appreciate it more, right? You appreciate a lot of things, right? Like, everything is passing by and you're going to pass along with it. And all we can do, I feel like, I was interested in existential psychotherapy last year, and I realized these are things, I don't know, I've always felt like I'm not here to do this, because I become so selfish about my tendencies. own thing, like my own fear of death. So I need to do work on that. So for that, all I can do is like prepare for death. And where do I start? And then that's where I see there are a lot of tools and tricks available. They say meditation is one of those illusions that is designed to make you realize of other illusions. Yeah. So you use some of these illusions to guide your journey, prepare for what is ultimately the truth, at least of our subjective self. Like, because I know in psychedelics we feel the oneness and so on, that is all there. But we are not remembering it at such an intricate level, right? But at an intellectual level, we still know death is there, right? And we can play it as a part. And I was watching this video of Ricky. How do you pronounce his name? Ricky Gervais.
Ricky Gervais.
Ricky
Super funny.
Gervais. Right. He's really nice. His ideas are so. I find my partner and I, we watch this video of his and like, this was sync with him. It's nice because so much of his aspects go around. There was a show on Netflix he made surrounding death, and there was an interview where he was talking many things about death. Because the more we start focusing on death, like very intensely, not as a joke, like, yeah, sure, I talk about it. No, sit and ponder, do what you need to do, but death is here for you. So see that it brings with it life. That's the whole aspect of beautiful thing about duality. That's one of the first ways that I understood how the duality worked. Like, I understood with respect to the example of light and darkness, right? One needs to exist for the other to exist. But same, that death had to exist for life to be so meaningful. So again, I've lost meaning to words like meaningful. So it's just it is, you're one with it, you're one with the experience.
You could say that you could say that the only truth is death, and that our whole lives we spend preparing to die. If you look at it from that angle, like, it brings us back to the idea that I think part of the problem is, I just have a different thought about it. Like, I think part of the problem is that we've taken all the dignity out of dying. Especially when I look at the Western cultures, like I see that so many people are commodified and they're sent to an old folks home where their insurance company designates a certain amount of money that they can have. And then all of a sudden, like my grandma, she became she pretty much she wasn't there. Like, she had outlived her cognitive ability. And my dad and my grandfather said that she had already died in some ways, but
Yeah.
they kept her alive, and she was like a shell of a person. And I think about that on one side, and then I think about the story that Deepak Chopra tells about his father coming in to meet him at an older age and said, I think it's my time. I'm going to go and die. And that reminds me of another story. I have a friend who's a Cherokee Indian, and his dad, he lives in Hawaii. His name's Eb, super awesome guy. I don't think he'd mind me sharing this story. And he had mentioned to me that his father had invited him to come back and see him because he was getting older. And so he flew back to see his dad, and his dad had told him, like, hey, I just wanted to see you one more time because I'm getting to the stage where it's my time and I'm going to die soon. And Eb, had a great time with his dad. And a week later, he read his father's obituary, and it was his father had went up to this point on top of a mountain where he would go to meditate sometimes, and they found him up there, and he was dead. But he had died on his own terms. He had said goodbye to the people. He had decided it was his time to leave, and then he got to leave in a way that he wanted to leave. And it just reminds me, like, the last, and I'm hopeful that I can have the courage and the strength and the fortitude to go out on my own terms. But I've often heard that the last job of a parent is to teach their children how to die. I've seen so many people, like my great grandmother died in an old folks home on a gurney, and there's just no dignity in there, and you become sort of a commodity to the hospital when you go out on those terms. But yeah, I think that maybe that's part of preparing to die, is understanding how you want to go out and understanding that you can leave a lesson in a way for those around you. And why can't we have a party? Why can't you? I was talking to my dad, and he's like, dude, I want to go on a cruise. I want to have a giant party. And then at the end, just give me the needle, man. And I want to feel no pain. I want to have a party, and then send me out, send me on my way. And I just think that, like, why can't we embrace death that way? Why can't we have this party to celebrate the end of life and people go out on their own terms, instead of like, oh, you have to go on a dialysis machine and we have to come and visit you in a place that makes everybody feel uncomfortable, and people have to be scared of dying, and that's easy for me to say because I'm not yet at a point where I'm facing death. So it's easy for me to say that, but I'm hopeful that I'll maintain that same type of vibrance when I get older. But I love that you and I end up talking about this, because I think it's so relevant, and I think it's something that it's not an easy subject for people to talk about, but there's so much in there to learn from. There's so much in there to talk about, and it's a
I think
beautiful
it's just
subject.
the mainstream. In the mainstream, it's not coming out because the more I dig into detail of art of dying, there are literally so many art of dying books out there. Like one, I saw the top two that I know was one is Osho and one is S.N. Goenka, right? And all these books, many people are trying to have this idea. It's just not a what it's kind of the idea that what's it gonna do if we talk about it, right? But it is actually happening at a smaller level, right? It's like the secret club. You need to know where to look for, and you will actually find people who are damn interested in talking about it. And I will share this particular thing what you said about the needle. I've had this because for me, fear of death and more than that accompanies is the fear of suffering. Oh, I don't want pain. I don't want that. You know, I will. So instead of the needle part, I used to think if I was gonna die, I wish it was in sleep. Like I just didn't know
Yeah.
about it. But I've turned my perception about it after reading these books that you have to be very conscious of your death. It's a very important step that you take, right? Again, forget reincarnation or not, it's just that if what we train for right now is, let's say you and I are interested in devoting our life to be here now, I believe that's the only thing we can do, because after that whatever happens, there is no narration about it. So you're here now, you can do anything you want, but you're here and now, right? And it's
Right.
all subjective experience. So when we do that, I feel like personally I've got into place. I'm not there practically, like I'm not okay with dying right now, but I want to be conscious of it. I don't want to avoid any of the accompanying things with it. And with respect to what you said about dying in a gurney, I still think it's what we observe from the outside. What is truly essential is the state of mind of the person who's going through it. For example, I saw this guy dead in the railway station, right, in India, right? He was dead. And when I looked at him, I was like, yeah, sure, I want to be that. Like, I don't know, I might be that. I can't like so I don't plan on having kids, right? And with all assumptions, and it's only my partner, and if she dies before, what I'm gonna be doing is pretty much I want to be just by myself, and I probably wherever I am, and if death comes, what can I do? I cannot get up and move. I'm just gonna. And if people at that space, let's say, oh, he's dying, we're gonna send him to hospital, and that happens sometimes, right? And if they put you in some old age home where you're aware but you're not able to communicate that you don't want this and so on, it's not an undignified death. It's just situation is happening that way, but you still have the same work to do. You're still you as an experiencer is going to stop existing subjectively and maybe merge with one or whatever happens. Like these are speculations, but it is quite some grounding nature to just talking about death. Like it, it is like the more I talk about it, I'm focused on it, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't stop me from doing things. That's the funny part, right? And you don't give up on life. You don't give up. You actively participate with it in ways that in ways how to change yourself to be more present. But you just don't like, I'm gonna die, I'm gonna stop doing things. That just doesn't happen. This I went to this meditation thing, and the monk was explaining these concepts of the temporary nature of things, right? And there is this term called anicca in the vipassana meditation. They talk about impermanence, right? And one of the fellow meditators, he asked the monk, like, I intellectually know anicca, like I understand that it's temporary, but just because it's temporary, I just lose interest in stuff, right? What do I do to change? That's the part. Like, initially it might be that he gave an example of how the sun is rising and setting, right? When the sun is going to set, just because it's setting, you don't get angry over it. You don't say it's meaningless to see the sun. You enjoy it. And in fact, it's because of how the wavelength is. When it's rising and setting, the wavelength is so big that you see red and orange, and it's beautiful, right?
Yeah.
And you know it's gonna go, but you let it go. You also know on some level that, of course, like me thinking about it obsessively to stop it is not going to stop it. Like I can that doesn't happen. So to be able to be there and experience, these are few of the things with which we are born. I don't know any people personally who are sad that the sun is setting. There can be people, but some
Yeah.
people are very naturally inclined to admire things and let it go, right? When the time comes. So our life is like that. We have to appreciate, admire, be grateful, do all those sorts of things. But when the time is here, we should let it go. And the more we are aware of how the body is operating fundamentally, I think that's why the examples you gave about the Cherokee Indian, or who's the other guy? His father, right? Deepak Chopra's father. I think the more you're with your body, you just know it. So, like,
Yeah.
just like, for example, things that I think about, because when I go use the washroom and I don't have enough time at work, I have a 10-minute break, and I'm like, I need to poop, but maybe not. I can hold 3 more hours, right? So it's fine. I just need to pee in right now. And I go and I'm wondering, like, whoa, I know these things and I have like specific control, like, to let go of one and hold the other, and these things are happening, and no one taught me this. I just know it. And then I
Hmm.
was vaping weed the other day, and I was making like circles that went out. These things, it's not like I can be proud of it, and it's also something that I didn't learn from others. So how is this happening? It's just wisdom and knowledge. These are already there. You just have to stay with the process, and when the time is right, it will surface up and you will consciously know it. But the funny thing is, you will have no ownership over it. There is no like, it's my idea, it's my way, my thing, like I am good at this. It's like, I have no idea how did I learn to poop, the same way I learned how to vape circles, or I learned this or that. And you will also learn the fact that, it's time for me to go. And based on
Mm.
what we have done, what our work has been towards our whole life, if people are talking about if we are talking about doing things, then we are still too much on this plane of reality. So we want to see
Mm.
things done, and our energy is trapped in this. So when death comes, like, the fear of missing out is there. But the funny thing is that out of like 14 billions of existence now, you and I, like, flickering one flame just comes and goes, right? It's minute. It's like this. When we watch 3 hours of movie, right? Let's say one of your favorite movies. Is every single second so nice? No, there are, like, let's say at least 2 seconds of the movie that, yeah, I wouldn't have placed it here. It's whatever. But you don't judge the whole movie based on that. Same way, I don't think we should judge the existence based on our subjective viewpoint. We tend to do that. We tend to
Yeah.
think this is it. But if you see all the things that's happening, this is like, yeah, this is 2 seconds of the bad screenplay. Like, it's not my fault. Who wrote it? Brahma, come on. Better screenplay next time. But it's fine. Like, the rest of the movie is good because I was not there.
Do you think that there's a certain set of insights that can only be achieved in the moment of death? Like, is there a certain type of awareness that you can only experience at that moment?
You can, I think, again, intellectually speaking, you can do those if you're meditating. And I'm talking about years of meditation very consistently, and
Mhm.
that's pretty much becomes your life, right? You can, but more often than not, if we do our, doing multiple roles, wearing multiple masks, most things surface up in the moment of that particular experience. So of course there are going to be a profound thing of like, whoa, I thought actually I was afraid of death. Death is not as bad, or it could be any of those sort. Like for example, even near death experience, right? Near death experience is, it's not just I am going to die. It could generate a lot more things in here. For me, the whole event, right, pumped up my compassion. But the same thing I intellectually knew, but it was pointless in my life. I was just an angry guy who was screaming out here and there. Like there was no point. But when it experientially happens, and it humbles you down, like that's what I feel. Like, that experience was very necessary, because thinking back before that experience, I was like, yeah, things were changing, but there were a lot of concepts I held on to that was stopping me from my path. So I had to drop it through the this particular situation manifesting as an experience. And death is one of those major experiences, because what we solidify and think, for example, I cannot think myself beyond this subjective
Mhm.
view, because I am that is the
Yeah.
consistent truth for me every day, because I don't feel the pain of others, I don't feel the anything of others. I wake up, I do my things, so I am very limited to this. So for me it will be a profound step, and for most people it's a profound step if when we are not locked in deep states of meditation or trance.
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, one time I was out on my route and I was working, and there's a guy on my route, a really nice guy, and it was when the vaccines were coming out and COVID was big, so it was like probably 2 years ago, and he'd always ask me, "Hey George, did you get your vaccine?" I'm like, "Nope." And so this went on for like six months, and then a year, and so I would see him like every 3 days, and it just kind of became a joke between us. Did you get it? I'm like, "Nope, I'm not gonna get it. Did you get it? No." And so we would always laugh. And then one day he drives a purple Jeep. His name's Davo. And one day I'm in my work truck, and he's pulling this way and I'm pulling this way. And he pulls up close to me, and I was eating chips, right? So I'm eating, and he pulls up next to me and he goes, "Hey George, did you get your vaccine yet?" And I went to say something to him, and right as I went to talk, I inhaled this chip that like got caught in my throat, so I couldn't talk. I started choking. I was like, ah, ah, ah. And he thought I was joking because I didn't get the vaccine. He's like, "Did you get the vaccine?" And I started doing this, and he's like, "Ah ha ha ha," but like I was really choking, like I couldn't breathe.
Yeah.
And then like I kind of slumped down in my truck, and he jumped out of his Jeep, came over, grabbed me, and like right as he was getting ready to do the Heimlich maneuver, like I coughed up that chip. But
Yeah.
in that moment, like I thought, this is how I'm gonna die. I'm gonna die choking on a chip in my work truck. And it was like this crazy moment. And like I thought it was just this flicker of like, this is how it is. I'm gonna die. And for a moment, I believed it. I'm going to die choking on a chip in my truck. And it was so surreal because it was funny, but I fucking was gasping for breath, thinking I was gonna
Mhm.
die. So after that point, like and then I drove off like nothing. Okay, I didn't die, and I just kept off working. But it was so strange to me. And we started talking about death, and that's why part of that question had come to my mind, like, do you think there's this profound things that happens on your deathbed? And for me, the answer is like, nope, just choking on a chip. That could be it. It's crazy,
I
right?
mean,
Like
I
they can
think
approach you.
there are different forms of death, right? So dying in a car accident, right? I take my car out, I slid, boom, nothing, no point,
Done.
like, no time for you to self-reflect and so on, no point to understand what's happening. So yeah, I don't know, in that cases there would be any profound thing. Instead, like for example, things like chip, our first thing would be survival, fear
Mhm.
of death rising, the first
Yeah.
defense mechanism, that's like, I need to do something to get this chip out. So of
Yeah.
course we don't have the space to create profound insights at that point, right? So we need to be very calm to have that, and for that to happen we need to have what we call as a natural death. It shouldn't be very driven. What is natural? Like, let's say if I keep smoking every day, if I have lung cancer, and if I accept that I have lung cancer, that can be a natural death. So I'm trying
Sure.
to differentiate what natural death in this case versus, dying in an instant, like by a
Hmm.
bullet to my forehead or something. So in that case, once I'm accepted and I create this space in my head, I think magic can happen at that point. Yeah, but it again, this does involve a lot of preparation for death, like to even keep on pondering and to, yeah, know it's coming. I just go to YouTube. I follow interesting groups on Facebook that post video about how a monk died consciously. It's a 4-minute video, just a group of monks surrounded sitting. This monk is just, there is nothing you can't see. The funny thing about those things, and funny thing about a person meditating, right? It's boring to the viewers because nothing is happening,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? So you can't literally like get anything out of it. But for me, watching those videos makes me more courageous or more disciplined towards my practice, because ultimately I realize intellectually I cannot do that final part, let go of this body, which is
Hmm.
intellect is part of the body. So in order to do that, I need to have practice beyond intellectual understanding.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah. It's
I
fascinating.
hope I have enough time to work on myself.
Man, Ranga, I love it, man. We almost did 3 hours right here.
I
It's such a fun
know.
conversation. I feel real thankful for it, man. I could probably talk to you for another hour and a half if I didn't have some things I got to handle right now. But before we go, what is there anything you got coming up, and where can people find you, and what are you excited about?
You can find me on LinkedIn, but as I said, I've just become too selfish, caught up in this body to work on my things first. So I do not have anything that I don't believe at this point that, at least given my way things have happened, I don't personally believe we can help other people unless there is this, you know. So I see it could change. 6 months later, I could have something, up and going, so I could write a book. But given the state of mind right now, all I can tell you is that just like to go and sit and meditate, and then have these conversations, with you, with a couple of friends. And there was another guy, Darian, who invited me to his podcast for. We were talking about cultural issues, right? What barriers are there, and I got his contact through Randall, who released his book Triumph Over Trauma on 23rd. So those things I want to do. Like, I want to
Yeah.
share my story. I want to share this thing. Like, even if there is one person who thinks I just needed to hear this to give myself more time before I form judgments about how depressed I am, right? Because that what suffering we are going through, it's the key to our liberation, right?
Yeah.
So instead of classifying it and pushing it down or trying to get it fixed with some temporary methods, we can go deeper into it. So the conversation leads us both to do a work in our lives and share this out there. You never know what happens. But that's it from my side.
Yeah. That's all I got too, and I'm real thankful. It's always a blessing, and I feel like I walk away with a lot of interesting things to think about, and sometimes I feel like I learn more about myself talking to you. So
I,
thank you for that.
See,
I
Krishnamurti,
appreciate
that's
it.
what he says. There is nothing more happening in this world than, like, the whole world is a mirror for us to see ourselves. The same happens.
Yeah,
Same happens.
that's so true. It's so
Yeah.
true, and we're back to Krishnamurti, where you're projecting, and if you can embrace that, and maybe it's a selfish thing to do, but if you can embrace that, then everybody you meet becomes a teacher to help you understand the world that you see, that you live in, and becomes pretty
Yes.
beautiful.
This goes to
So
the Ramdas quote: when you know how to listen, everybody is the guru. Yeah.
it's so true, man. It's
Yeah.
so true. Well, that's what we got for today, ladies and
Yeah.
gentlemen. Thank you so much for hanging out. Oh, you know what? Before we go, Ranga, you got a few more seconds. I would like to go through some of these, some of it, what everybody said right here. Let's go through,
Yeah.
let's see. Okay, here's the first one. This one comes from our friend Stacy Fordyce, who's hanging out in Valley Center probably. She says that she's out doing some chores, hanging out with. She's got a bunch of emus, this girl, and she's always meditating while picking up poop. What a great place to meditate, right? Like being
100%.
around some animals, or what kind of meditation would you give to somebody who is lucky enough to be out on a farm and has a beautiful family? What would you have to say to her, Ranga?
Right? There is nothing. This comment is self-satisfying. Like nothing more else to do. If you're there while picking poop, that's all. Right? Like I have the hesitation to go pick up poop in my backyard with these 3 dogs, and like you clean it 3 days later, it's like minefield. So hesitation is there, but once I go and I see that it's not, it's an effortless activity, and I'm not even doing it. I just have to be there. And let's say if it's summer and the poop gets more stinky, more opportunity to stay equanimous. I feel like one of the things about meditation is you stay who you are without being affected by the thing, right? So when we do all these manageable, uncomfortable things, right, where your state of mind is still with you, right, you do things, and there is no classification. Everything can be meditation. So what can I say? That's it. That's enough.
All right, let's see what Benjamin has for us here. Attaching thoughts to sounds, music seems to be a strong tether to anchor ideas.
100,
Yeah, I like this one.
100.
I had some. It's pretty good, right? Like you had spoken about previously how you've been using music sometimes in your meditations to think about things, but you can use music or sounds or vocals or drums, especially, just to anchor different emotions and to carry them with you when you feel anxiety or something like that.
100%. Like what songs I listen to on psychedelic trips, when I listen to them, the thing is that the beauty about this that I have discovered in the last month or so is that the song don't necessarily put you into the state of mind that you were while, but it reminds you of that it reminds you to do a practice that gets you there,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it's not like you listen to the song and you're like, yeah, I'm there. There'll be a lot of barriers. I still think it doesn't happen easily, but just getting that wake up call from a song which is you're playing, that is beautiful. Like to have that anchor point to remind yourself, okay, I know the state of awareness I was there. So yeah.
And sometimes it's when you've done that enough, it's weird. It's almost like the world's calling to you, because you can be in a state of anxiety or starting to get frustrated, and then that song comes on and boom, you're like, oh man, it's the world telling me I should relax right now,
Yeah.
It's funny to think about how that works. What else does he got for us here? Mechanistically, wait, am I saying that right? Yeah. Mechanistically, trauma seems to be about completing broken loops. Those loops are the collection of synaptic firings. It would seem intent plays a role, but there is also the mechanism of things. I think that this is about the idea of
I think it's about what I said about everything is everyone is traumatized. It's true. Again, when he says about synaptic firings, right? We go to the baser level, right? Fundamental level. We're not talking at a collection of the neurons. We're trying to go at the individual level where there are no emotions. There is just on and off mechanism, ones and zeros, right? Firing or not firing. And in that sense, yeah, it's just that I still don't understand what he meant to say by it. Would seem intent plays a role, but there is also the mechanism of things. No one is intently, I believe, is trying to traumatize other people. I don't know. That's what I get.
yeah.
The meaning?
Yeah, maybe he's talking about the idea of the iris or your pupils being dilated so much, and then so you're just seeing like the firing in there, and so the intention might not be there. I think that was earlier on in the conversation.
Yeah.
And then let's see, and then this one is a good one to this is just typical Benjamin C. George right here, and I think it sums it up nicely. And thank you, Ben, and thank you, Stacy, and thank you for everybody that took a few moments to be with us today. Embrace the journey, for the journey is the reward. I think that's a great place to leave it right there.
Yes, 100%.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thanks so much for hanging out with us. I had a phenomenal time, and we'll be back again soon. Aloha.